Chapter 294. From time to time, Qin Haoyong would glance at the group of people who were gathered together. He could always hear people covering their mouths and laughing. This made him very puzzled. What exactly was going on inside? He was also very curious about how that person had the guts to participate in the lantern-grabbing contest. Even without his father's instructions, he wouldn't take the initiative to fight with that person. In any case, that person wouldn't be able to win. If that person was in trouble, he might be able to help him and gain a favor. On the other side, Lu Royale looked at the tiny spot of light at the bottom of the incense burner and felt increasingly carefree. She would be able to feel carefree after she had her revenge. He made her lose so much face and was even punished. She couldn't let him have it easy. As for the teams in the distance, they didn't pay much attention to this side. Although many people had already discovered Rinpochen and Tonglan, it was easy to recognize a rookie and a Lolita. These children of officials were also well informed, but most people didn't see them as opponents. They had to get past Lu Royale and Hong Xian first. Everyone knew what Lu Royale was thinking. Although they heard that the last from the Tong family was talented, she was too young and her teammates were too weak. She wouldn't be able to accomplish anything by herself. Sir Rin, it's about to start, Du Changkong reminded him. Oh, Rinpochen replied. His voice sounded a little muffled from under his helmet. At this moment, Rinpochen had completely transformed into a human-shaped hedgehog. His entire body, including his face, was covered with a layer of soft iron armor. The surface of the armor was densely packed with sharp spikes. Furthermore, the gaps between two spikes were extremely small. At most, a finger could fit through the gap between two spikes. All the spikes were 1 inch long and were enough to pierce through a person's palm. The tip of the spikes was ghastly cold. Needless to say, there were barbs at the tip of each spike. If these spikes were to collide with a person's body, it was guaranteed that the other party would be pierced like a sieve. When the spikes were separated, they would even leave a piece of flesh behind. This was the legendary artifact for squeezing people on the subway, the 17th century Siberian bear hunting suit, Rinpochen's ultimate trump card, the enhanced version of the human-shaped hedgehog suit. The first point of this suit was that it was breathable. There were countless small holes on the soft iron armor to ensure a certain degree of breathability. Furthermore, there was a layer of soft lining inside, which made wearing it less uncomfortable. Secondly, all the spikes were made of alloy to ensure their sharpness and hardness. At the same time, their weight was reduced. Finally, this set of equipment came with a trump card. However, that trump card was not only useful to others but also to oneself. It could be said that to kill 1,000 enemies, it would damage oneself by 1,500. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it must not be used. The only weaknesses of this set of hedgehog gloves were probably the throat, armpits, and inner thighs. However, these weaknesses did not reduce the lethality of this set of equipment. Rinpochen had high hopes for this suit. After wearing it, he felt that his whole body was brimming with power. Transforming into the porcupine silver Saint Seiya, he would be able to create a bloody path in front of him, be it a mountain of knives or a sea of fire. My body is already unbearably hungry and thirsty, Rinpochen said loftily. Everyone else was speechless. Why did that sound so strange? Loser, I want this too. The little Loli's eyes were bright and full of vigor, and her face was full of envy. If we win this time, I will give this to you, Rinpochen said generously. Little Loli immediately looked at him with disdain. You didn't want to send me off at all. Sir, it's about to begin, Suel reminded. At this moment, there was already someone standing in the middle with a flag in his hand. When the small flag in his hand landed, the lantern-grabbing contest officially began. Everyone's spirits were lifted. Get out of my way later, don't block the way. Rinpochen warned Du Changkong and Du Changqing, who were in front of him. The two of them nodded and cursed silently. Only fools would block in front of him. It was fine if they bumped into someone else, but if they bumped into him, they would definitely be unlucky. Even though the bodies of the aboriginals were tough, they weren't invulnerable. The barbed spikes on his body looked like they were not to be trifled with. However, could it be that he would be kicked out of the competition the moment he rushed out? This was basically against the rules, right? Everyone's eyes were on the small flag that was being raised. The last few seconds seemed to be especially slow. The surrounding audience was also attentively watching the performances of this year's participating teams. At the same time, they could also meet many young experts. Rinpochen was still completely blocked. He moved his body slightly to see if there was anything wrong with it. Meanwhile, the little Loli was still staring at Rinpochen with shining eyes. Begin. The small flag in the hands of the person in the middle of the arena turned into green smoke and suddenly fell to the ground. There were no other superfluous words. As the word "begin" and the small flag fell to the ground, 26 teams, consisting of more than 200 silhouettes, rushed out from the waiting area. At the same time they looked at the teams on both sides with vigilance. "Haha, my big axe is thirsty." A shout suddenly came from the crowd. Qin Haoyong's eyes lit up. These words were good and he had to remember them. Lu Ruoyao had a look of disdain on her face. "How dare you say such words? I will not let you touch the lampstand today." As Du Changkong and Du Changqing dodged aside, a slightly clumsy figure rushed out from within. What were they doing so mysteriously just now? I can finally see it. Qin Haoyong had been curious for a long time. He wasn't in a hurry to rush out and instead looked to the side. The next moment he saw the figure that rushed out. His eyes widened and he staggered, almost falling to the ground. What's that? Qin Haoyong's mind was filled with question marks. The 4 scouts from the Hongxian team simply didn't care about the other team and directly approached Renbaqian's team. Among them was Lu Ruoyao. When she saw the figure that rushed out from the crowd, she suddenly felt a tightness in her chest and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "This is against the rules," Lu Ruoyao shouted angrily. After the Empress started, she immediately looked over there. When she saw the figure that rushed out from the crowd, she almost choked. The corners of her eyes twitched non-stop. Previously she was wondering where this guy got his confidence from, but she didn't expect him to actually be like this. Pfft. Tong Jingye immediately spat out a mouthful of tea. He stretched out his trembling hand and pointed in that direction with a shocked look on his face. "Although I already know that you are shameless, I didn't expect you to be so shameless." Qin Chuan was even more dumbstruck. "What is that thing?" After Tong Jingye spat out his tea, the others also looked in the direction he was pointing at. They saw a large hedgehog with spikes all over its body that reflected a cold glint. It dashed wildly all the way and everyone was horrified. How could it be played like this? Everyone felt that today was really an eye-opener. Shi Qing had been an official for so many years, what hadn't he seen before? However, this was the first time he saw something like this at the lantern-grabbing contest. At first he was dumbfounded. Then he turned to the Empress uncertainly and asked, "Your Majesty, isn't this against the rules?" The corners of the Empress's eyes twitched for a long time. After hearing Shi Qing's words, she said in a deep voice, "If it's armor, it doesn't seem to be against the rules. But this." Shi Qing pointed at the center of the field. "Is this armor? If it was anywhere else it would be fine. As long as one had a weapon, that armor would be a joke. But now there were more than 200 people in the field who were unarmed." Suddenly, a large hedgehog appeared. "What could the others do? In the future we will add another rule. Armor must not have sharp ornaments to avoid hurting others. However, since there are no previous rules, those who don't know are not guilty," the Empress said casually. Tong Jingye, who was at the side, opened and closed his mouth for a long time like a catfish that had come ashore. After a long time, he looked at the Empress from the corner of his eyes with a hidden bitterness. "Your Majesty, you have changed." Chapter 295. When Renbaqian saw Du Changkong and Du Changkong stepping aside, he dashed toward the lampstand without saying a word. He did not care about anything else. He knew in his heart that he was the weakest in the entire field. Even if there were 10 of him, he might not be able to defeat the second weakest person from the bottom. Since that was the case, he might as well run. At the same time he was laughing wildly in his heart. "Why don't you guys stop me? Why don't you guys stop me? Try touching me." Renbaqian was indeed the fastest. After running for a few dozen meters, he had completely surpassed the rest. In the distance, some people had already started to fight. However, more people looked at the figure that ran the fastest. They were all dumbfounded. What the hell was that? Was that even possible? Wasn't that a clear violation of the rules? More than half of the 100 people were looking at him. Should he stop them? How could they stop him? Everyone looked at each other and finally turned their heads to look at the side of the field. Lu Ruoyao stomped her feet and shouted, "Foul! Foul!" He broke the rules. Even the contestants in the field had such a reaction, let alone the surrounding spectators. Such a large porcupine with a cold glint was running at the very front. Those who were slightly stronger could see it clearly and were in an uproar. Gu Changkong didn't notice it at first, but when he noticed the movement of the person next to him and looked in the same direction, he almost choked. There was actually such a talent in the Gu clan? But soon he remembered something he had heard recently. Could it be that person? Other than him there should be no one else. After staying in Dayo for more than 10 years, he was very familiar with the temperament of the Aboriginals. There shouldn't be anyone who would come up with such a bizarre method. The Empress saw that there were still a few contestants in the arena who were looking at Rinpoche in a daze. She turned her head and glanced at Tong Jinye. Tong Jinye coughed with a look of hidden bitterness and his voice resounded throughout the arena. It's not a violation of the rules. The match will proceed as normal. The Empress nodded slightly to express her satisfaction. However, when these words reached the ears of the crowd, it was unknown how many people understood for the first time what shady dealings meant. Especially the children of the officials present, they were so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. This was definitely shady business. You can't play it like this. Lu Ruoyao, who was still shouting foul, was almost angered to death when she heard this. Finally, he appeared in front of Rinpoche with a furious look on his face. However, Rinpoche lowered his head and directly rammed into it. He was still shouting, "I can't stop, someone pull me." The little loli behind him had a look of contempt on her face. Do you dare to act more realistically? And what are your short legs doing there? Just like a wheel. Lu Ruoyao saw a bunch of sharp thorns flashing with a cold light heading toward her. After hearing Rinpoche's words, she became even angrier. However, she really didn't dare to not dodge. She didn't want to test whether these sharp thorns could pierce through her or not. She dodged in a flash. Her heart was so sullen that she wanted to vomit blood. Previously, he was prepared to prevent him from even touching the lampstand, but now he couldn't even stop him. However, the other two women in Hong Xian's group stopped Su El and Jianghu. Lu Ruoyao gritted her teeth and followed behind, looking for an opportunity. Especially when the little Lolita smiled at her when she passed by. Du Changkong and the rest also had a relaxed expression on their faces. Among them, their team was the most relaxed. Many people from the other teams had already started to fight. Even so, as the others began to accelerate, Rinpoche began to fall from first place. After all, compared to the others, his speed was really too slow. At the side, bang, bang. The sound of banging could be heard incessantly. Many people were punching and kicking each other while running. From time to time, someone couldn't dodge in time and was sent flying by another person's kick. There were also people who were grabbed by the arm and thrown out. That hedgehog, be careful. Suddenly, someone shouted. A person drew an arc and flew in Rinpoche's direction, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. He adjusted his body a few times in the air, but his direction didn't change. If they collided, even the best outcome would be Rinpoche being sent flying with the soles of his feet pierced into a sieve. He was the one who had yelled out earlier. When the little Lolita heard this, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Rinpoche's current appearance was no different from a hedgehog, the kind that couldn't be eaten. The Aboriginals' cultivation was divided into four-way heaven, Kismet heaven, cardinal heaven, and longevity heaven. The commoners could basically enter four-way heaven, while the people present were at Kismet heaven. After all, it was already considered good to be able to reach Kismet heaven at this age. This level of strength couldn't withstand the spikes on Rinpoche's body. As a result, even though Rinpoche was like an ant in the eyes of the crowd, no one was willing to take the risk of being pierced into a sieve to stop him. Even Lu Ruoyao wasn't willing to take the risk of being pierced into a sieve and attack Rinpoche. Should you hit him lightly or heavily? If you hit him lightly, you would suffer a huge loss, but if you hit him hard, don't forget Rinpoche's status. Even Lu Ruoyao, who hated Rinpoche so much, at most wanted to stop him and embarrass him. At most, he would only suffer a small injury. If she were to seriously injure him, she would have to be crazy to do it. The Empress wouldn't let her off. As a result, she was on the verge of vomiting blood, but there was nothing she could do. This was even more so for the others. However, that person's shout was really too funny. Big hedgehog? Ah. The little Lolita laughed heartily. Rinpoche raised his middle finger at that person as he ran. At the same time, he was calculating in his mind. If he didn't change his speed, he would bump into that person. Should he bump into him or not? At this moment, Du Changkong suddenly appeared in front of Rinpoche. He stomped on the ground, soared into the sky, and threw a punch at the person in the sky. In any case, everyone in the arena was an opponent, except for his own side. That person wasn't afraid at all. At the same time, he threw out countless punches and collided with Du Changkong. After a few collisions, that person was punched in the chest and flew out. Du Changkong was also smashed back to the ground. Both of his feet landed on the ground and created two pits that reached his calves. Rinpoche was about 60 to 70 meters away from the lampstand, but the others started later than him. They were still in a daze for a while, but they had already reached the lampstand. It was like a tractor racing against a Ferrari for 600 meters. Even if the tractor ran 300 meters first, it would still end up with the exhaust. More than 10 people rose from the ground and leaped up to the second level. 2 of them exchanged kicks in mid-air. One of them crashed into the supporting pillar while the other was kicked off the stage. However, the person who crashed into the supporting pillar was pushed off the stage by Qin Haoyong. Qin Haoyong then leaped up to the third level. Other than those who leaped onto the stage, some people immediately turned around and blocked the way of the other teams behind them. Ren Baqin didn't care about them. He dashed forward with his body covered in spikes and shouted, "If the gods block us, we shall destroy the gods. If the Buddhas block us, we shall destroy the Buddhas. Those who block us shall die, and those who give way shall live." The others raised their eyebrows and made way for him. There was really no way to block the barbed spikes on this guy's body. However, with his speed, the outcome of the battle was decided before he could even climb halfway. The little Lolita, Tong Lan, followed closely behind Ren Baqin and dashed forward. However, the others were all blocked and fell into a chaotic battle. At this moment, there were 30 to 40 people fighting on both sides of the lampstand. From time to time, someone would be kicked off. The area below the lampstand was even more chaotic. Other than those on the stage, half of the remaining people were fighting on the road and the other half were here. Phew. Ren Baqin collapsed below the lampstand to catch his breath. This enhanced hedgehog suit had indeed lived up to his expectations. After safely sending him here, there shouldn't be much left for him to do. However, since he had nothing better to do, he might as well climb up. It would also look good on his face. The little Lolita didn't care about him anymore and leaped up to the second level. Before she landed on the ground, she saw another person in front of her. That person let out a cry of surprise as if he was surprised that there was such a young contestant. His movements weren't slow at all. His right hand transformed into a broadsword and slashed down. Tong Lan pressed on his arm with one hand, flipped her body in the air, and sent a downward kick toward the top of her opponent's head. Her opponent only took half a step back, which was just out of Tong Lan's reach. Then he slashed with his palm again. Tong Lan's eyes widened. "Are you bullying me because my legs aren't as long as your arms?" Her legs danced in the air like a windmill. She kicked her opponent 7 times in a row, forcing him to take a few steps back. Tong Lan borrowed the force to land on the second level of the lampstand. She then leaped into the air and pounced toward her opponent. Within a few rounds, she had kicked her opponent off the stage. Meanwhile, Ren Baqin was still climbing from the first level to the second level. After all, he was weak to begin with. Coupled with the fact that he was wearing armor, it was inconvenient for him to move. Previously, it was still fine for him to run, but now it was troublesome for him to climb to the second level. After all, there weren't any ladders on this lampstand. Everyone just leaped up. If it weren't for the rule that they had to climb up 1 level at a time, many people would be able to jump up 2 or 3 levels with a single leap. Ren Baqin didn't have this ability. He could only climb up the supporting pillar. At the same time, he had to be careful of the spikes on his body piercing the pillar. Lu Ruiyao watched from behind as Ren Baqin climbed up the pillar like a large hedgehog. She felt suffocated. She took off her shoe and threw it at Ren Baqin. The shoe wasn't considered heavy, but with the strength of her hand, it smashed into Ren Baqin's back like a brick. This attack to vent her anger had resulted in 2 consequences that she hadn't even thought of before. First, the shoe was completely penetrated by the spikes on Ren Baqin's back and couldn't be removed. Second, this force directly slammed Ren Baqin against the pillar. The spikes on his chest all pierced into the pillar, and it was as if his whole body was nailed to the pillar. Ren Baqin felt something hit his back, and his whole body was directly pressed against the pillar. He could even hear the sound of the spikes on his body piercing into the pillar. What the F***ck? Ren Baqin's eyes widened. He used all his strength to push the pillar, but the spikes, which were supposed to be used as a deterrent, were now hooked onto the fibers of the pillar and couldn't be pulled out. Many spectators in the distance saw this scene and immediately burst into laughter. Many people immediately gloated and laughed out loud. The corner of the Empress's eyes twitched again. Not only her, but Shi Qin, Ko Zhihai, Tong Jinye, and Qin Xuan were also twitching. At present, the fastest person had already reached the 4th level. However, a few people were fighting and blocking each other, and no one could get away from the 5th level. Originally, everyone was looking at the few people at the top, but they didn't expect such a scene to happen below. That hedgehog was actually slammed against the pillar by a shoe that flew out from the crowd. This happened too suddenly and was too unexpected. For a moment, Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or spit out their mouths. Ren Baqin was hung on the pillar for a long time. He gritted his teeth and spent a lot of effort to pull the spikes off his body. The effect of Lu Ruiyao's flying shoe was somewhat beyond her expectations. Subsequently, she felt a surge of pleasure in her heart. At the same time, her eyes lit up. While fighting with the others, she paid attention to Ren Baqin and was ready to throw the other shoe at him at any time. At this moment, she saw Ren Baqin's body moving as if he had pulled himself out, so she was ready to throw the other shoe at him. In the end, before she could move, another shoe flew out from the crowd and hung on Ren Baqin's back, slamming him against the pillar again. F***ck. Ren Baqin was extremely furious as he hung on the pillar. Which bastard hit him? This time, the people below were no longer in the mood to fight, and their movements also slowed down as if they were moving in slow motion. Each and every one of them looked at the big hedgehog on the pillar. This guy was really too hateful. He had broken the tradition of the lantern-grabbing contest that had lasted for so many years. Among the group of unarmed Aboriginal youths, there was such a strange person, a big hedgehog with a cold glint all over its body. Yet he was recognized. How could this make the others feel at ease? Chapter 296. Damn it! Ren Baqin cursed, took off his helmet and sat on the ground. There were shoes everywhere. If it wasn't for Su Lu Jianghu and the Du Changkong brothers who rushed over to protect him, he would have been drowned in shoes today. The shoes on the ground were proof of that. Have you recorded the name list? Ren Baqin gritted his teeth and asked Du Changkong. Sir, other than the ones on the lampstand, almost everyone on our side has thrown their shoes. Du Changkong held back his laughter. This was the first time he saw over 100 people throwing shoes at each other, and it was rather spectacular. Give me the name list tomorrow, I'll get someone to get it. Ren Baqin couldn't help but say, so what if there are more people? Can they throw shoes at others just because there are more people? I'll find a chance to make things difficult for them. But was he that hated? In fact, only Lu Ruiyao hated him. The second one just felt that it was fun. When the others saw this, they felt that it was fun. In the end, no one was in the mood to continue fighting. Even the people on the other side of the shelf would come over to take a look. It could be said that this year's lantern-grabbing contest was the most relaxing one in the past years. Everyone was laughing so hard that the audience outside was laughing so hard. Even the Empress couldn't help but laugh. Ren Baqin felt that he had lost face this time. He was actually kicked by someone on the pillar. Even Tong Lan gloated when she saw him off the stage after the contest. I don't want that thing of yours anymore. Thinking about how many shoes were hanging on her back, she felt like dying. The lantern-grabbing contest was over. The winner was a lady called Jiang Ningyun. She wasn't famous previously, but she wasn't weak. She was almost on par with Hong Xian, and with some luck, she managed to snatch the lantern. Get someone to wrap up these shoes for me. I want to bring them back. Ren Baqin wanted to get up and take off his armor, but sadly he realized that the spike under his buttocks was stuck somewhere. He almost couldn't get up. When he got up, there was another piece of rotten wood under his buttocks. It was hilarious and Tong Lan laughed for a long time. After he changed his clothes, he saw that only Su Wei, Su Lu Jianghu and many guards were waiting for him. The rest had already dispersed. For example, the Empress and the officials in the imperial court had already left. Now almost all the roads into the city were blocked. Everyone took a detour before entering the city through another gate. As soon as Ren Baqin returned to the palace, he went straight to Pingle Park. He had lost a lot of face today. It was better for him to go back and soothe the trauma in his heart. Early in the morning the next day, Ren Baqin rushed over to Du Changkong's house and forced him to write down the name list. Ren Baqin received the name list and only saw 2 lines of it. He exclaimed in surprise. One of the names on the list seemed familiar. Sure gone. This is the great elder's youngest son, right? She seems to be 13 years old this year? Ren Baqin asked. Yes, he was the second one who threw a shoe at Sir. Du Changkong added. Umph. Ren Baqin sneered incessantly. This fellow really didn't know how he was going to die. There was a good saying, heaven's wrongs can be forgiven, but one's own wrongs cannot be forgiven. In a few days when the school reopens, I'll let him know why flowers are so red. There was also Tong Lan. Ren Baqin carefully looked at the name list that Du Changkong had written. There wasn't anyone on it who was going to enter the academy. But it didn't matter. Sooner or later he would find an opportunity to make things difficult for them. He carefully folded the paper and put it in his pocket before returning to the palace. When the Empress thought of Ren Baqin's heroic posture last night, she wanted to laugh. She couldn't help but say, You said that you would let me see your heroic posture. Rinpoche replied seriously, Your Majesty, just by looking at the first half of the journey, I was unstoppable and invincible. It was a pity that there was an accident in the second half. Otherwise it would have been perfect. The Empress shook her head slightly. Strength is the most important thing. Even though it was somewhat useful, you have also seen the results. Rinpoche nodded. He was clear about this matter. However, he had to practice Rui visualization once a day. By the time he came out, he would already be exhausted. Practicing it twice a day wouldn't have any effect as it was too much of a burden on his body. As for his fists and kicks, he couldn't even defeat a little Lolita every day. It was really not interesting. In the end, the Gatling gun was more to his liking. The nation wants some martial arts manuals and can't wait any longer. Rinpoche then talked about serious matters. Ever since the video chat in Milan, 9 months had passed on Earth. Those people had been waiting anxiously. The other party had already mentioned this matter when they went back the previous 2 times. Then give it to them. The Empress didn't seem to care at all. She wasn't very interested in the matters of that world. Let's find some that are easy to learn. It will be easier to see the effects. I think they will be more confident, Rinpoche said. The 2 of them went to Qingxin Palace Hall and took out 4 martial arts manuals. 2 of them were easy to learn at the beginning and difficult to learn at the end. The other 2 were easy to learn at the beginning. It was difficult to learn at the beginning and the practice was slow. However, at the end it was smooth sailing. There weren't many obstacles to advance from the man-wheel level to the earth-wheel level. I'll take these 4 manuals. I'm considered generous to give 4 at a time. Rinpoche felt that it should be enough to satisfy those people. As for the rest, it was up to them. However, those who were older now had almost no hope. Their descendants, on the other hand, had some hope. In any case, he had to exchange some good stuff for them. Cooperation was one thing, but the other party couldn't possibly gain something for nothing, right? Previously, he had taken a lot of things, which was considered as proof of his sincerity. For things like martial arts manuals, he had to exchange them for a good price. At the same time, Rinpoche also prepared to make a copy of these manuals and give them to his family. If he specifically chose more precious manuals for his family, it would be more difficult to practice. Secondly, it would be easy for others to target them, which would be troublesome. Rinpoche felt that it was enough for his family to live a good life. He didn't want to stir up too much trouble. Sometimes, knowing more and obtaining more wasn't a good thing unless he brought them into this world. However, in this impoverished world, it wasn't a good thing for them either. They couldn't even refresh their circle of friends even if they wanted to. The 2 of them disappeared from the main hall. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were already used to this situation. After cleaning the main hall, they went back to rest. The Empress would only be back in 18 hours at the earliest. At this time it was April on Earth again. It was the season of spring. The trees in the neighborhood were painted green and the air was always filled with willow catkins. Rinpoche opened the windows. The air was still a little cold, but it was noon and the temperature was acceptable. The Empress opened the fridge and took out the ice cream that she had stored inside. In a flash, she appeared on the sofa and switched on the television with her other hand. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the Empress, who looked like an otaku. He couldn't help but sigh and said, Your Majesty, let's go out and eat first. We can watch the television at night. The Empress casually responded. She took a bite of the ice cream and changed the television channel to find a drama that she was interested in. After watching the Japanese tear them apart with her bare hands for a long time, the Empress finally chose to give up. She stuffed the ice cream stick back into the packaging and stared at Rinpoche with her big eyes. Chapter 297. Rinpoche and the Empress changed their clothes and had a meal outside. Then they went to the supermarket and bought 5 carts of food reserves, all kinds of potato chips, popcorn, candy, chocolate, and, of course, wine. The 2 of them connected the shopping carts as if they were driving a train, attracting a lot of attention along the way. After returning home, they ran back and forth a few more times before sending all the things back home. Only then did the 2 of them settle down. Rinpoche downloaded a movie for the Empress. It was the Mandarin version of Final Destination. The unexpected and interesting plot made the Empress watch the movie with great interest and eat a big bucket of popcorn. On the other hand, Rinpoche unlocked his phone and read the message. There was Qin Qing. After the Lunar New Year, he met Qin Qing, but Qin Qing didn't seem too surprised. The Qin family was very concerned about Rinpoche's matter. As a result, the moment the arrest order was cancelled, they received the news. There were many speculations about what Rinpoche had done to actually suppress such a big matter. However, this was also a good thing for them. No one would reject a powerful friend. Other than Qin, there were also calls from home, and young senator he called home first. It was no big deal. His mother urged him to bring his girlfriend home. Ren Baqin turned his head and looked at the Empress. She was watching television and eating popcorn as if she hadn't heard anything. Next, it was Qing's turn. Qing had good news. The hangover medicine made from green vine powder had already been approved by the Food Bureau. At the same time, the production line had also been properly contacted. The pharmaceutical factory was in the midst of construction. After all these preparations were completed, the next step would be to advertise and expand the market. The only problem was that the green vines had only been planted for a short period of time, and the output was still not enough. It would probably take some time before the green vines could be distributed throughout the country. Qing told Ren Baqin to go to the Qin Corporation's building when he was free. After all, Ren Baqin had not been to the pharmaceutical factory that was under construction before. He had also not seen the person in charge. "I'll leave it to you. I'm not very interested in these things." Ren Baqin directly rejected them. He had enough confidence in the green vine powder hangover medicine. He did not intend to participate in the following events, nor did he intend to participate in the future. He could not stay on Earth for long, so it was better to keep a low profile. Currently, only the country knew about his situation better, and it would be troublesome if other people noticed him. Being an invisible tycoon was the best choice. However, he was the one who came up with the name, green vine powder hangover medicine. Blue bottle. Its name was Mana Potion. In the past, when he was playing games, his character didn't have mana, so he just had to drink a mana potion. In people's minds, magic was influenced by spiritual power. Getting drunk would cause a person's brain to become muddled and listless, giving people a feeling similar to losing their mana in the game, so they simply called it Blue Bottle. He had even been ridiculed by Qin before, saying that it sounded like the zinc supplements, "Use a blue bottle." After hanging up, Ren Baqin finally called Yang Sen from the Messier 87 department. The call was picked up after 2 rings. "Mr. Ren? Your saber has made some discoveries," Yang Sen said. Ren Baqin was a little surprised. He thought it would take longer. The blade is made of steel, but there's something else inside. It's a strange thing that seems to have a life of its own. According to Elder Lu's words, that saber of yours is alive, Yang Sen said solemnly. Ren Baqin wasn't surprised to hear this news. After all, that saber could grow and shrink at will, giving people the feeling that it wasn't an inanimate object. It might be intelligent and is avoiding our detection. Yang Sen's next words shocked Ren Baqin. Intelligent. Ren Baqin repeated this word. Usually, only mammals could be said to have intelligence, but he was surprised that a saber could be said to have intelligence. It's still a suspicion at the moment, and more experiments are needed, Yang Sen said. In fact, there wasn't much progress at the moment. The progress of the research on this saber was slower than they had imagined. Also, what do you think about the previous matter, Mr. Ren? Yang Sen finally got to the point. Cooperation. We can't just have one side pay, right? What are you going to use to exchange for the martial arts manual? Ren Baqin asked seriously. What do you want? Yang Sen asked. Through some of Ren Baqin's answers, he was able to judge the situation in that world. Previously he had already done that, but he didn't gain much. Ren Baqin rarely said anything valuable, and even if he did say something, there would be some lies mixed in. First, remove the people who were monitoring me and rummaging through my rubbish bin. This is the minimum sincerity of a partner, right? Someone was monitoring you? I'll send someone to investigate immediately. Ren Baqin's words made Yang Sen's heart skip a beat. The people he sent were all highly skilled professionals, and they shouldn't have been discovered by him. However, he was, after all, a legendary cultivator. He might have some unknown means of investigation. No matter what, he had to throw the blame away first. Not your people? Then you don't have to send anyone, I'll think of a way to deal with it, Ren Baqin said. In his heart, he was wondering if they really didn't send anyone to monitor him. That shouldn't be the case. Ren Baqin didn't realize that there wasn't anyone monitoring him. He was just casually bluffing the other party. In any case, he felt that if he was the other party, he would definitely send someone to monitor him. Don't act blindly without thinking. It's a society ruled by law now. Don't ever do that again. If you cause trouble again, there will be no way to clean it up. You can't do the same thing again and again. Don't forget what you promised when you came to Shanghai. Ren Baqin's words gave Yang Sen a big fright. Alright then, you guys send someone to deal with it, Rinpoche said casually. He didn't notice the other party's nervousness. It had to be said that Yang Sen was much more experienced than Rinpoche in this aspect. As for the martial arts manuals, you guys can use nuclear bombs to exchange for them. Rinpoche demanded an exorbitant price again, almost choking Yang Sen to death. What did you say? What do you want? Yang Sen felt that he had heard wrongly. Nuclear bombs, nuclear bombs, nuclear bombs. Important things must be repeated 3 times, Rinpoche repeated with a straight face. What do you want that thing for? How can that thing be owned by a private individual? It's too dangerous. Yang Sen growled in a low voice. I also have enemies in the paradise. It's just right to use this thing to blow them up. It's very easy for you guys to make nuclear bombs. The value of martial arts manuals is much higher, Rinpoche said seriously. Do you have a way to transport that thing? Do you have a way to launch it? How do you protect against radiation? How do you prevent leakage? How do you keep it safe? Yang Sen asked a bunch of questions in a row. Rinpoche pondered for a while and realized that he really couldn't do it. It shouldn't be a problem to transport it. A small nuclear warhead wasn't that heavy, but he really couldn't do the launching, radiation protection, and leakage prevention. However, he was just asking for an exorbitant price and didn't really want a nuclear bomb. It was useless to ask for it himself. He couldn't possibly throw one at the capital of Great Xia, could he? Therefore, he immediately took a step back and said, Then how about sarin gas? It's easy to preserve and I can use it. In fact, Rinpoche was just casually mentioning sarin gas. He still had 3 bottles, which were enough. He wasn't prepared to throw sarin gas onto the battlefield when the war started in 2 years. It was too inhumane. If he really did that, he was afraid that the outcome wouldn't be good. Furthermore, the Aboriginals weren't the weaker side, so there was no need to do that. He was even prepared to develop the technology of that world, but he didn't intend to develop weapons. This was because it would make cultivation worthless. That was a civilization that was completely different from Earth. In Rinpoche's mind, the combination of technology and cultivation was the way out for them. Only then would they blossom into magnificent flowers of civilization. Instead of creating all kinds of high-tech weapons that even an earthwheel expert like the Empress couldn't defend against, they shouldn't create weapons of mass destruction that even a cardinal heaven expert like the Empress couldn't defend against. It's also impossible to use sarin gas. Yang Sen was sweating profusely. This guy was really too dangerous. If he really handed it over to him and he came up on Earth, it would really be a big problem. Based on what he had done in the past, the probability of him having a brain cramp was really not small. Then tell me what you can offer? Rinpoche spread his hands even though the other party couldn't see. The Empress, who was beside him, turned her head and glanced at him. Then, she turned her gaze back to the television and shrank her body into the sofa. She squeezed herself between 2 sofa pillows and felt much more comfortable. She really didn't like these troublesome things. Since it's a martial art, I believe that we can come up with some optimization methods after researching it. You know, computers are sometimes more reliable than the human brain, Yang Sen said. This was also the point that they had the highest expectations for. Not interested. Rinpoche flatly refused. He hadn't decided whether to take out the martial arts that he practiced or not. Optimizing other martial arts was also meaningless to him. We can provide all the conveniences for your laboratory, including the purchase of various equipment and some other things. Not interested. If it was his own laboratory, it might be useful. However, with his current special status, the country wouldn't stop him if he wanted to purchase some things, right? It was too deceptive to use this as an exchange condition. Not to mention that the laboratory wasn't even his. Yang Sen rubbed his temples. It was really troublesome to deal with the other party. He couldn't give them what they wanted and he didn't know what they wanted. I will give you a call in a while. Yang Sen hung up the phone and immediately informed his superior to see if he could get some good suggestions. As far as he knew, there should be a think tank that specialized in researching the 2 of them. They had been researching all the information about the 2 of them. Rinpoche threw his phone aside and started to ponder. What exactly did he want? He had been thinking about this question for a few days, but he still couldn't think of an answer. Equipment? He couldn't bring it over. Technology? What he needed now were the more basic technologies that didn't need to be exchanged. He could get them from the internet and books. As for the more advanced technologies, he would have to wait until that world developed to a certain extent. Blueprints? Similarly, he could get whatever he needed and he didn't need what he couldn't get now. In fact, he didn't need the most advanced blueprints for many things. Even the brick kiln couldn't be used now. The conditions weren't up to par, let alone other things. Money? Job. They weren't of much use either. Women? Rinpoche looked at the person who was watching television and eating popcorn. He lowered his head and pondered again. Rinpoche suddenly felt that he was stumped. He really didn't have anything that he wanted. Chapter 298. Rinpoche pondered for a long time and realized that he was stumped. On the other side there was another group of people who were stumped by him. However, no matter what, they couldn't give up this opportunity. Even if they didn't know what he wanted, they still had to talk about it. Not long after, Rinpoche received a call from the imperial capital. Yang Sun can't make the decision and is looking for the higher-ups, right? Rinpoche thought about the number and picked it up. The other party didn't speak and neither did he. Since you called, I don't believe that you won't speak. Seeing that the other party didn't speak, Rinpoche laughed in his heart. Were they putting on airs? He put the phone on the coffee table and put it on speaker. Then, the sound of the Empress watching Final Destination was transmitted to the other side of the phone. Rinpoche glanced at the phone screen from time to time and realized that the call had been hung up after a minute. What's going on? Is it because I left a big shot hanging for too long and the other party isn't satisfied? Big shots can't be so petty, right? Rinpoche muttered. Those big shots had to deal with a myriad of issues every day and didn't have the time to dawdle. Could there be a problem somewhere? While he was pondering, the phone rang again. This time he picked it up and immediately heard a voice. Is this Mr. Rin? I called you just now but there was no sound from your side. The person on the other side of the phone wasn't very old, but his voice was very magnetic and easily made people feel good about him. It's me. Rinpoche was dubious about the other party's words, but only a fool would study this problem. Please wait a moment. After that person finished speaking, Rinpoche heard a rustling sound. It seemed like he was passing the phone to another person. Mr. Rin. This time the voice was very calm and familiar. At least he had heard this voice on video for a period of time last year. Besides the Empress, this person was the most awesome person he had seen in his life. It was impossible for him to not remember him. Hello, big shot. Rinpoche's voice was very respectful, like a primary school student meeting the principal. However, he directly lay on the sofa and conveniently snatched a popcorn from the Empress. Slap. The Empress gave him a backhand slap without hesitation. Previously, his hand was swollen like a pig's trotter, but now it was just a little red, and there were 4 fingerprints on it, which were extremely distinct. However, compared to before, it was already much better. Rinpoche mimicked a cat and licked the back of his hand. When the Empress saw this action from the corner of her eye, she immediately had the urge to give him another slap. Mr. Rin, your parents don't know about your situation, right? The person on the other end of the phone laughed. What do you mean? Rinpoche immediately became alert. Don't you want to teach things like cultivation methods to your parents? Rinpoche thought for a while and said, this doesn't seem to have much to do with our deal. Actually, after that video I thought about it for a long time. I don't think an old man like me would be able to cultivate. The other party continued. Rinpoche nodded in his heart. The other party was right. He really did not think that those big shots would be able to cultivate. Not to mention that they were too old, they had so many things to do every day. How could they have the time to cultivate? Actually, it's just a fantasy. Through the simulation of cultivation methods, we can find out the factors that affect people's lifespans. However, this requires someone to cultivate to a certain extent first. I believe that Mr. Ren and Madam Chi will not assist in the research. In that case, I don't know how long it will take for someone to cultivate to a stage where their lifespan will be affected. I'm afraid that an old man like me will not be able to see it. Seeing that the other party had already considered this issue, Rinpoche nodded and said, You are right, I'm not very optimistic. Therefore, we just want to leave something for future generations. Even if this kind of cultivation method is given to us, it will spread sooner or later. This thing can't be hidden. It just depends on whether it's 10 or 20 years. The final result will be the evolution of the entire human race and a huge change in human society. At that time, even I can't predict what kind of changes will happen to the rules of human society. Nevertheless, I still want to leave something for future generations. Perhaps this is the key to the evolution of all human beings. Don't you think so, Mr. Rin? Rinpoche thought for a while and felt that the other party didn't want to pay him. This wasn't very good, right? This wasn't the way to cooperate, right? Boss, allow me to say something. Even though *** is comfortable for both of us, we still have to pay, Rinpoche said respectfully. The person on the other end of the phone immediately spat. The Empress was stunned for a moment. She was probably trying to figure out what the word asterisk asterisk meant. After all, this word was too far away from her. Then her eyes widened and she scratched a hole in the pillow with her claws, causing the cotton to fly out. It's just an adjective. Stay calm. Stay calm. Rinpoche covered the phone with one hand to appease the Empress. In the end, the Empress gave him another slap on the back of his hand. This time, there were 8 crisscrossing finger marks on the back of his hand like an LV. The Empress slapped Rinpoche and then grabbed the pillow with all her might, making the room look like heaven. In heaven there were feathers flying everywhere, and in the room there were cotton wadding flying everywhere. What Rinpoche said just now was really too wretched. Even the Empress had such a reaction, let alone the person on the other end. He was immediately dumbfounded and only laughed bitterly after a long time. I don't know how to answer your question. Rinpoche's words were really too suffocating. Crude words but not crude logic. Rinpoche laughed mischievously. What do you want? Just say it, the person on the other end of the phone said straightforwardly. Nuclear bomb. Rinpoche was interrupted halfway through his sentence. You don't have to say such things, just tell me the truth. Rinpoche thought for a while and realized that he really didn't need anything at the moment. As for money, he still had 90 million euros left from the 100 million euro loan. The other party didn't mention anything about repayment. They didn't even mention the time limit or interest rate, so he didn't need to think about repaying the loan. Or he could consider repaying the loan in the future when the inflation reached the point where buying a loaf of bread would cost 3 or 2,000 euros. I brought 4 martial arts manuals with me. One condition for each martial art manual. I will mention it when I need it. It won't affect the nation and I won't demand an exorbitant price. It might be to collect something, for example, certain blueprints or some rare items. Try your best to help me collect them. Or, if I do something wrong again in the future, help me settle it and consider it as fulfilling one of the conditions. Rinpoche raised his own conditions. 4 martial arts manuals in exchange for 4 conditions. Speaking of which, it wasn't a loss. After all, he really couldn't think of anything that he needed. It was acceptable to keep the 4 conditions and mention them when he needed them in the future. I can promise you the first condition, but it can't violate the nation's laws and regulations. It can't go against morality and also can't demand an exorbitant price. The nation will also act according to its capabilities and will try its best to help you if it can. As for the second condition, Mr. Rin, forgive me for being blunt. Given your status, the previous incident shouldn't happen again. As long as Mr. Rin doesn't find trouble with others, no one will find trouble with you. Who knows, a few days ago, there might be a surviving member of the Jin family rummaging through my rubbish bin to find evidence of my crimes. Rinpoche conveniently made a scapegoat. Since he had nothing better to do, it would only take a few words, so why not? Chapter 299. In the end, both parties came to an agreement. In the afternoon, 3 cars arrived, and more than a dozen people alighted to carry the 4 secret manuals and a text comparison table that Rinpoche had written before into a password-protected box. At the same time, they left behind a memo stating that the big shots would recognize today's conditions in the future. Of course, no one knew what would happen when the time came. No one could predict something that far in the future. Rinpoche felt a lot more relaxed after settling the matter. He felt the cool breeze blowing in from the window. In the past, after experiencing a harsh winter, it would feel good when the flowers bloomed in the spring. It was as if the bodily functions of the body had become more active. However, he didn't feel much after returning from Dayo. After all, the temperature in Dayo during winter was almost the same as summer here. There wasn't even the slightest bit of bleakness. Naturally, he didn't feel as if his body and heart had been revived after experiencing a cold and bleak winter. He casually looked at the news on his phone and suddenly realized that the hover motorcycles that were equipped within the rich nation last year were actually ready to be launched on the market. In the past, it took a long time for an item to be launched on the market. However, he only spent half the time, so he felt that it was much faster. This thing is quite interesting. Rinpoche carefully looked at the parameters of the hover motorcycles. It mainly used a drone to lift the body of the vehicle and could fly at a height of a few to 10 meters above the ground. What is it? The Empress heard Rinpoche's voice and stretched her head over. The two of them were almost touching. This distance was already considered normal for the two of them, and neither of them felt that there was anything wrong with it. This is a flying motorcycle that can fly at a distance of a few to 10 meters above the ground. It's quite interesting. In the future, we won't have to worry about crowds on the streets. Rinpoche showed her the item on his phone and laughed. The Empress's eyes began to shine as if it was something very interesting. I want this. The Empress immediately made the decision. This thing could fly at a height of 10 meters. It was a little dangerous for ordinary people, but it wasn't a problem for the Empress. Even ordinary aboriginals wouldn't be too worried. However, it consumed too much electricity. It could only fly for about half an hour with a full charge, and its speed wasn't fast either. It could only be considered an oversized toy at a speed of 48 kilometers per hour. It seems that we have to speed up the installation of electricity in the palace. Rinpoche started to use his phone to search for solar energy storage batteries. After all, he still needed electricity to play with some interesting things such as this flying motorcycle. After searching for a long time, he finally found a battery that met his requirements. It had a capacity of 3000 Ah, which was equivalent to 36 kilowatt-hours of electricity. One battery was equivalent to 10 ordinary batteries that he used before. The Empress could switch on the air conditioner and look at her laptop. At the same time, she could switch on those light strips. This was enough for her. The weight was 255 kilograms. Although it was a bit heavy, it could still be taken away. At the thought of this, Rinpoche immediately called the manufacturer. After making some inquiries, he ordered 10 of these batteries, 100 ordinary batteries, and a set of solar crystal panels. Then he found another merchant and ordered 100 sets of street lighting equipment. Then he went to a rental website to look for a storage unit. For the next 2 days he was busy with this matter. First he rented a warehouse in the suburbs. Then he asked the 2 merchants to transport the goods to the warehouse by truck. Through Ching he hired 2 security guards to guard the warehouse. None of this could be hidden from the public and the nation would easily find out. Rinpoche didn't care either. What's wrong with batteries? Why can't I use my phone or something? It would be strange if the blessed enclave had electricity. After getting someone to send a battery to his house, he and the Empress returned to Jianghu Palace Hall. Currently, he had more than 300 kilograms of strength. It was just enough to bring back the battery, the Empress, and a small portion of the Empress's snacks. With this battery, the electricity problem in Jianghu Palace Hall was completely solved. With 3000 Ah of electricity, even if all the light strips were switched on, it would still be enough to last for 8 hours. Just 3 batteries would be enough to last for an entire day. Furthermore, he had ordered 10 batteries. Even the spare batteries were sufficient. Rinpoche could once again enjoy the days of electric lights and air conditioner. 10 of these batteries would take about 10 trips. It would take close to 2 months in Dayo and half a year on Earth. Next, he still had to bring those street lighting equipment and ordinary batteries over. Within half a year, Dayo should be able to complete all the street lighting projects in the palace. Although it would take a long time, the scenery in the palace would definitely be exceptionally beautiful. Rinpoche was also filled with anticipation. This was a midterm plan. In the short term, the school at Black Bamboo Academy would start the day after tomorrow, on the 6th of January. He would welcome a group of useless second-generation students. On the morning of the 6th, Rinpoche woke up early, washed up, ate his breakfast, and left the palace for Black Bamboo Academy under the accompaniment of the guards. It was a rather big and empty courtyard. There were 3 bungalows in the middle, and there were still buildings under construction at the back. At the corner of the courtyard, there was a frame with a few pulleys on it. Although the courtyard was leveled, it wasn't neat. After all, the construction had not been completed. Transporting sand, cement, and red bricks would make the courtyard very dirty. Rinpoche looked at his watch. It was 7:30. There was still half an hour before 8. However, none of this batch of useless second-generation students came early. They really didn't know how to respect their teachers. But it didn't matter. They would understand after leaving this place. Rinpoche believed that he would educate them into a new generation of aboriginals who were well-developed morally, intellectually, physically, and aesthetically. After he finished pondering, he saw a few youths walking in his direction. There were 4 men and 1 woman. They were dressed like ordinary people, and they should be some of the commoners who were selected later. When they got closer, Rinpoche asked for their names and confirmed that it was true. Subsequently, more people came in succession. The first to arrive were all commoners, and there were a total of 19 of them. Including the people sent by the court officials, there were a total of 50 people. When it was almost 8 o'clock, Rinpoche saw a youth riding a 4-corned cow staggering over. When the cow got in front of Rinpoche could smell the stench of alcohol. Name? Rinpoche asked expressionlessly. Tai Jiaxiong. When that youth saw the person in front of him, He restrained himself and said respectfully. Although he wasn't willing to come here to learn anything messy, he still had to pay attention to the person in front of him. Go in and find a place to sit, the house in the middle. Rinpoche pointed to the back and that Tai Jiaxiong quickly went in. After him, the others arrived one after another. Many of them brought along their servants and more than half of them were late. Furthermore, a few of them reeked of alcohol and had a look of disapproval on their faces. They were only here because of their family's instructions, just like Tai Jiaxiong. Rinpoche sneered in his heart. What a bunch of idiots. Here I will let you know why the flowers are so red. Tong Lan bounced to Rinpoche and greeted him. You good for nothing. I'm your teacher here, so you have to call me master. Otherwise, you will either be beaten with a ruler or brought back by Sir Tong, Rinpoche said with a straight face. Tong Lan bared her canine teeth and in a flash she went into the courtyard. She even turned around and snorted at Rinpoche before arrogantly walking into the room with the loudest voice. Following that, there was Shurgan, the youngest son of great elder Shurqing. Although he was only 12 years old, he wasn't short and was about the same height as Rinpoche. He looked rather simple and honest, but Rinpoche remembered that he threw his shoe at him. This fellow wasn't a good person either. After everyone arrived, Rinpoche turned around and closed the door, isolating the servants' gazes from the outside. The inside and outside were two different worlds. Chapter 300. As one of the only 3 classrooms in the academy, the room wasn't small. The chairs and tables inside were arranged neatly, exactly the same as those on Earth. However, it was still very new to the Aboriginals. None of the people here had ever studied in such an environment before. At most, the elders in their families would teach the younger generation how to read and write, and they would read by themselves and ask for help if they didn't understand something. As a result, it was very refreshing to have dozens of people crammed into the classroom. The commoners were better off as they were relatively quiet. Although they were commoners, most of them were the children of petty officials or had some kind of relationship with them. The remaining 30 or so people began to call their friends and make a ruckus. Rinpoche could hear the ruckus from afar in the courtyard. He walked into the room with a sneer. Although the noise was much softer, it was obvious that they didn't care much. Quiet. Rinpoche knocked on the table, but the noise wasn't much softer. In particular, the voices of those who were hungover were particularly loud. Rinpoche stood in front of them, glanced at them expressionlessly and said again, "What are you bunch of useless people doing here?" As soon as he said this, the room suddenly became quiet. Everyone stared at him and many of them looked angry. If it weren't for his special status, they would probably have started a fight. "It's better than someone being hung on a pillar," someone said, and everyone burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Rinpoche's expression didn't change, but he made a mental note of Shurgan. "Although I'm not strong at my level, you can participate in the lantern show and even touch the lampstand. I'm afraid that others won't even bother to look at you," Rinpoche continued. "Let me clarify something here. It's not that I want to take you in, I just want to take in a few disciples. It was your elders who sent you here. To put it bluntly, you are a bunch of useless people who can't do anything and won't be able to do anything in the future. Your elders don't want to see you at home like pets for the rest of your lives, so they sent you here." Rinpoche continued to sneer. After he said this, many people's faces turned red. Many of them weren't talented in their families, and they knew that Rinpoche's words were like a knife poking at their wounds. As the saying goes, don't hit someone in the face and don't expose their shortcomings when scolding someone. Rinpoche was taking turns to hit someone in the face and expose their shortcomings, specifically picking the most painful spots to hit. "Who are you calling trash?" Someone stood up and scolded. "Isn't that so? Don't you have any F***king idea why your elders sent you here?" Rinpoche had a malicious look on his face as he mocked them to the max. "Let's see who's the real trash." A young man shouted angrily and smashed the table into countless pieces. He then stomped on the ground and pounced toward Rinpoche. Umph. The corners of Rinpoche's mouth curled into a sneer. His eyes were filled with malice as he raised the Type 81 rifle and fired. He had already guessed that this would be the result. When he entered, he picked up the Type 81 rifle and placed it on the podium. 222. 3 gunshots rang out and the man fell to the ground with blood spurting out of his body. Originally, many people were waiting to watch a good show. They didn't expect such a sudden turn of events. Immediately they were dumbfounded. Their gazes lingered on the Type 81 rifle in Rinpoche's hands as they tried to guess what it was. Look, even a child can kill you with such a simple thing. If you aren't trash, then what are you? Ren Baqin continued to mock them maliciously. At the same time he turned to Su Wei and said, "Drag him out and throw him to the clinic. Let the doctor cut open his wound and take out the bullet. Also inform his family that this trash will be trash for the rest of his life. There's no hope for him anymore. Keep him as a pet." Ren Baqin's malicious words made everyone's faces turn ugly. The man on the ground almost vomited blood. He struggled to get up from the ground with blood oozing from his right shoulder, right arm and collarbone. Ren Baqin tilted his head. He wanted to hit the man's shoulder just now, but his hand shook. Su Wei went forward to pick up the man. He still wanted to resist, but Su Wei twisted his arms and carried him out of the classroom. After a while he came back and continued to stand in the same corner. "Look, you don't even know what strength is. In my eyes all of you are trash. Of course in the eyes of others you are the same." Ren Baqin continued to mock them. "I'm different from them. Don't confuse me with them." Tong Lan immediately retorted. At the same time she sprinkled a handful of salt on the wounds of others. Many people glared at her, but there was nothing they could do. Shirgan curled his lips. He also wanted to say this. "You are slightly better than them." Ren Baqin had to admit that according to the standards of this world, Tong Lan could be considered a genius. "However, you are only slightly better. All of you don't know what strength is." Tong Lan was immediately unconvinced when she heard this. "Even you can't beat me. But I have 10,000 ways to kill you." Ren Baqin spread his hands. "That stick." Tong Lan looked disdainful. Even though the thing that shot out from that stick was very fast, she believed that she could still dodge it. "There are 10,000 people in Great Xia who had the same idea as you. Now their bones have turned into ashes." Ren Baqin's words immediately reminded everyone of some rumors. However, the Aboriginals only valued strength and would subconsciously belittle or even ignore such things. In particular, Ren Baqin's weak strength always made people feel that he was very harmless. It made people forget that he was also a killer and had killed countless people. In addition, he was unscrupulous just now. He injured a person and even threw him out. Even though they still looked down on Ren Baqin's strength, they didn't dare to be as unscrupulous as before. First of all, you have to understand your own status. You are useless and this is undeniable. Right now you have two choices. First, stay here obediently and try your best to not be so useless. Second, go back and tell your elders that you are useless and are beyond redemption. Naturally, you don't need to come here anymore. Just like that idiot just now, you can go back and tell your elders that you are useless and can no longer be saved. Then you will be kept as pets at home. Ren Baqin mentioned pets 3 times in a row, which deeply hurt everyone's heart. "Those who want to leave can scram now," Ren Baqin said again. However, this time no one was impulsive. Even Tong Lan curled her lips. Ren Baqin nodded slightly. The Aboriginals weren't so bad-tempered. At least they knew what was good and bad and could still listen to advice. This was considered a good sign. "First, I want to tell you what I can teach you. What I can teach you isn't much, but it isn't little either. The most important thing is what exactly strength is." Even though everyone was still furious, they could finally listen to him quietly, unless they were like the person who was thrown out just now. "Tong Lan, how much strength do you have?" Ren Baqin casually asked. "About 3,000 kilograms. Tong Lan mumbled. Ren Baqin cursed in his heart. A 10-year-old girl could have 4,000 kilograms of strength. The Aboriginals were indeed abnormal. He wasn't the only one who felt that it was abnormal. The others immediately turned to look as well. One had to know that even though the Aboriginals were strong, four-way heaven experts only had 500 to 2,000 kilograms of strength. Kismet heaven experts generally had 2,000 to 4,000 kilograms of strength. Except for some gifted people like Xiong Pai, most of the others were like this. Great Xia practitioners were much weaker in terms of strength. They only had a little more than 1,000 kilograms of strength, while Earthwheel experts couldn't exceed 2,500 kilograms. As a result, the strength of the Aboriginals far exceeded that of the Great Xia practitioners of the same level. Tong Lan was only 11 years old a few days ago, but she actually had the strength of 2,000 kilograms. This young lady from the Tong family could really be considered a genius. This made many people jealous. Why wasn't they the one with such talent? In that case, do you know how to move something that weighs 40,000 kilograms? Without destroying anything, you're the only one. That's impossible. Tong Lan immediately said. If it's impossible, I won't say it. In that case, let me ask you another question. Can anyone lift themselves up? Your weight is about 200 to 300 kilograms, and your strength is several times that. Can any of you do it? Rinpoche looked at the crowd below and asked. Then he really saw a few idiots trying to lift themselves up. Chapter 301. Why can't you lift yourself, who weighs 200 to 300 kilograms? It seems like a simple task, but none of you can do it. Rinpoche looked at the crowd. There were 49 students, 34 boys and 15 girls. They ranged from 13 to 18 years old. Rinpoche saw that everyone was looking at him doubtfully after they tried it. It was as if they were wondering why they couldn't do it. Rinpoche then said, "This is what I want to teach you. What is force, how is force conducted, and how is force used? How can you do things that you can't do? How can you move objects that are several times heavier than your own strength? Of course, the most important thing is the nature and principle of matter in heaven and earth. This subject is called physics. You should be glad that you can sit here and listen to me talk about this because it clarifies the nature of matter in heaven and earth. After learning this, you can truly see the world. Everyone here should know me. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Rinpoche, also the superintendent of this Black Bamboo Academy. You are the first batch of disciples here, so you can call me teacher. Towards a person who can teach you knowledge, a person who can decide whether you stay or go in this academy, you must maintain sufficient respect. At the same time, as a pioneer in knowledge and someone who knows more than all of you combined, you must also maintain sufficient respect. Do you understand? Rinpoche propped his hands on the table and looked down at everyone. Everyone understood, but no one said anything. Understood, teacher. The person who spoke was a young man named Su Ping, who was considered an ordinary disciple. After he spoke, the other ordinary disciples followed suit. What about you? Are you mute? My words are very clear. I'm the boss here, so you have to answer my questions. If you don't want to stay here, go home and be a pet. Now, do you understand? Rinpoche raised his voice and said coldly. Understood. 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 Everyone was intimidated by Rinpoche's imposing manner and answered softly. Louder. Is this a food market? It's so messy. Rinpoche frowned and looked dissatisfied. Understood. This time the voices were much louder, but it was still very messy. After all, it was difficult for these undisciplined Aboriginal youths to answer at once. Although this was an extremely simple matter for the Earthlings, it was not a difficult task. Rinpoche nodded slightly and said, a country has its laws, a family has its rules, and an academy has its own rules. When the time comes, I will tell you what you can and can't do. If you violate the rules, you will be beaten and punished if you deserve it. In serious cases, you will be expelled from the academy just like that idiot just now. You all know your own situation very well. Most of you have a foreseeable future. You will achieve nothing and have no value. All you can do is maintain this state of being alive. Yes, it's a state. You look alive, but in reality there's nothing. You're all hollow. Even if you peel off your skin and put it on a wooden frame, there's no difference between you and yourself. Because this is how you are. Your insides are empty, nothing at all. You only have the appearance of being alive. Although many people are like this, do you want to be like this too? This Black Bamboo Academy is your only chance to learn something, to do something, and to leave something behind. Let those who think that you are useless open their eyes wide and look at you in a new light. Therefore, cherish the opportunity to learn here. This is your only chance, Rinpoche said word by word as he looked at everyone. Following his words, the expressions on many people's faces changed. Anger, unwillingness, contemplation, and various other expressions appeared on their faces. Ever since they were young, this was the first time someone had spoken to them like this. It was also the first time someone had said these things to them. Rinpoche had pointed out their future. Although they were unwilling, they had to admit that his words were correct. It was just like what he said. Only two people were different from the rest. One was Tong Lan. She turned her head to look at everyone's expression, then looked at Rinpoche before turning her head to look at everyone again. It was as if the expressions on everyone's faces were very interesting to her. The other was sure gone. His eyes were dull and it was obvious that he was daydreaming. Rinpoche waited for everyone to digest what he had said before continuing. Every day, school starts at 7 a.m. and ends at 2:45 p.m. Lateness is strictly prohibited. There are 4 classes every day, and there will be a 15-minute break between each class. Currently there are 4 subjects. The first one is language. The language that you are currently learning is too complicated and needs to be simplified. This is the simplest subject, but it also includes basic moral and quality education. A civilized society is bound to be orderly and has a certain moral standard. Moral standards are often higher than the law. Just like not bullying the old and the weak, this is the most basic moral standard. The second subject is mathematics. I don't want to see you counting with your fingers for addition and subtraction of more than 10 digits. You only have 10 fingers, which isn't quite enough. The third subject is physics, which is what I just said. It is the natural science that studies the most basic structure of the material world, the most common interactions, the most general laws of motion, and the experimental methods and thinking methods used. The fourth subject is chemistry, which is also a natural science. It mainly studies the composition, nature, structure, and laws of change of matter, as well as the creation of new matter. The first two subjects are the basics, and the last two subjects teach you the essence of this world. There will be an assessment every month. Those who fail the assessment will be punished. Those who fail multiple times will be expelled from the college. Do you understand? Rinpoche asked loudly. Understood. Although everyone said that they understood, they were actually dumbfounded. What were the last two subjects talking about? They didn't understand at all. We have already learned how to read. Why do we have to learn again? Tong Lan raised her head and asked. In the future you have to raise your hand to ask questions. You can only ask questions with my permission, Rinpoche said in a deep voice. Then he explained, you have learned the language of Great Xia, which is too complicated, difficult to write, and not easy to spread. What I am teaching you is different from Great Xia's, and it is more suitable for promotion. I hope that in the future at least many people in Dayo can read and understand the news in newspapers, instead of the current situation where 99% of people are illiterate and have to guess what they read. What's the news? What's the newspaper? The little girl continued to ask. The news is something that happens in this world. It is recorded so that everyone can know about it in a timely manner. As far as the situation in Great Xia, as near as what happened in Lan City, as far as national affairs, various government decrees, and as low as the fight between your grandfather and Sir Qin in the brothel last night. Chapter 302. What did Deputy Prefect Ren talk about today? During dinner, Tong Jingye casually asked Tong Lan. He was really curious about what Rinpoche would talk about. In his heart, Rinpoche had a lot of good stuff. Whether it was the cement, red bricks, glass factory or solar furnace, they were all very useful. Furthermore, he took them out casually. No one knew how many things he had in his stomach. At the very least, he didn't know about the colorful things that he saw in Yangxin Palace Hall. There were also the 2 floor lamps of the Empress, the sofa in Yangxin Palace Hall, the computer that could emit sound, and the ice that was made from ice. There were simply too many of them. This was also the reason why he sent his favorite granddaughter to Yangxin Palace Hall. I don't know. He talked a lot and was very long-winded. Tong Lan curled her lips. She really didn't understand many of the things that Rinpoche talked about today. However, how could she ask since no one asked? She was a genius. Tell me, what did he talk about? Tong Jingye asked again. He said that they are all good-for-nothings. If they go home, they can only be kept as pets for the rest of their lives. Studying at the academy is their only chance. Tong Lan consciously excluded herself from the conversation. There was also an idiot who wasn't convinced. In the end, that good-for-nothing used a stick to shoot a few things at him and beat him to the ground. Then he was chased out. Tong Lan giggled again. Tong Jingye nodded his head slightly. Rinpoche's words were correct in some aspects. Those who weren't talented weren't valued at home. They couldn't advance in their cultivation and wouldn't be able to achieve anything in the future. They could only take the monthly allowance to produce offspring. He also said that he wanted to teach us 4 subjects and teach us how to read. It's different from before, Tong Lan continued. Oh, how different? Tong Jingye was very interested and asked. The surrounding people didn't say anything as they listened to the conversation between the adult and the child. They were also very interested. At least when Tong Jingye was in the residence, he praised Rinpoche a few times. This caused the people in the Tong residence to view Rinpoche differently from the general view of the outside world. He said that the language of Great Xia that we used in the past is too cumbersome. He wants to teach us a simpler language that is easier to spread. Tong Lan repeated Rinpoche's words about how many people could read the news. From national affairs to your fight with Mr. Qin at the brothel last night. Tong Lan told him everything in full detail, and the entire hall quietened down instantly. There was dead silence. Everyone had a strange look on their faces. Cough, cough. Tong Jingye coughed. Soon after, he thought about the news that Rinpoche mentioned. However, it didn't make much sense no matter how he thought about it. It was similar to a notice board. What else? Tang Xinye continued to ask. There are also 3 subjects: mathematics, physics, and chemistry. He said that physics is the study of the structure and laws of the world, and chemistry is the study of the composition of the world and the transformation of new substances. These 2 subjects are called natural sciences. Tang Xinye's expression immediately turned serious after hearing what Tang Lan said. Tang Lan didn't know what this meant, but she immediately sensed some problems. According to these words, he was clearly talking about the way of all living things in the world and nature? Didn't this mean that he was talking about all the principles in the world? If that was the case, then what Rinpoche said was rather shocking. But was what he said true? What did he say? Tang Xinye pondered for a moment and said, "Remember what he said every day and bring it back for Grandpa to see." Tang Lan pouted and replied. It was too troublesome for her to remember. She felt that she was in big trouble. On this day there were many people who had the same conversation. Many of them didn't care about what Rinpoche said at first, but after listening to others they paid attention. After all, Rinpoche's words were too scary. Studying the structure of the world, its composition, laws, and the transformation of new substances. No matter how they heard it, it wasn't an ordinary thing. The way of all living things in the world and nature. Many people immediately thought of the legendary way of heaven. How could they not care about it? At this moment, the Empress was curled up on the sofa. Rinpoche was sitting on a small stool outside the courtyard of Yangshin Palace Hall. There was a bonfire in front of him and a rack on top of it. Rinpoche was roasting a leg of lamb. One hand was shaking the stick while the other hand was cutting the leg of lamb. In the past, Rinpoche always thought that there was nothing that couldn't be solved with a barbecue. If there was, then he would have two. However, there weren't any lamb skewers here. He could only rely on himself. He slowly roasted a lamb for 2 hours. The smell of the roasted meat had already spread to Yangshin Palace Hall. The Empress sniffed, turned her head to look in the direction of the main hall's entrance, and continued to watch a television series. Just when the Empress's patience was about to run out, Rinpoche came in with a basin. It was emitting an extremely fragrant barbecue aroma that made people salivate. As for the guards outside Yangshin Palace Hall, they had a look of hidden bitterness on their faces. That person had been roasting meat under their noses for more than 2 hours. The two of them had been smelling the aroma for more than 2 hours. It was simply a kind of torture. Rinpoche and the Empress sat opposite each other at a small table. Rinpoche poured a cup of wine for the Empress and a cup for himself. It definitely wouldn't do to eat barbecue without wine. There were also 2 plates of fruits at the side so that the roasted meat wouldn't be too greasy. The Empress stuffed 2 big pieces of meat into her stomach and drank a cup of wine before asking casually, "I heard that something happened on the first day of school?" The Empress already knew about this news, but she only asked about it now. An uncut jade can't be useful and an uncut person can't be straight. I'll teach them a lesson first so that they can be disciplined in the future. Rinpoche smiled casually. Even though those guys weren't very talented, they weren't honest. If he didn't suppress them from the start, it would be difficult to discipline them in the future. The Empress nodded her head. I reckon that someone will complain about us tomorrow. Rinpoche continued. The Empress snorted coldly, how dare they? Rinpoche gave her a thumbs up. I like this domineering style of yours. What was a backer? This was it. Regardless of whether what he did was right or wrong, anyone who dared to raise an opinion would be beaten up. I heard that you are going to talk about the principles of heaven and earth. I'm very happy. Even though the Empress's tone was flat, there was still a hint of happiness in her words. This was because she knew that what Rinpoche was going to talk about could really advance the development of Dayo, was the foundation of that world and was truly important. She was very happy that Rinpoche was willing to teach these things to others. This was because she was the Empress of Dayo, and she would never only think about one family or one place. I have said before that I will make Dayo what you want it to be. Rinpoche raised his cup from a distance and drank it. The Empress's eyes curved when she heard this. Rinpoche took out a blue flower from his sleeve and placed it on the table. I see that many flowers have withered recently, but only this flower has been blooming all along. I feel that it is like you, it will never wither. When other flowers bloom, it will overshadow the others. When other flowers wither, it stands out. The Empress picked up the flower and looked at it. Then she pinned it on her clothes and said faintly, this flower's name is Qingyang. It will only wither during the cloudy season before it blooms again. When it withers, even the heavens can't bear to part with it, so they shed tears. And when it blooms again, the heavens will also show their happiness. Rinpoche continued the Empress's words. He gave himself a thumbs up in his heart. Coaxing a girlfriend required strength. Seeing the Empress wrinkle her nose, Rinpoche knew that she was very happy. This was a small action of hers. Wrinkling her nose meant that she was in a good mood and very cheerful. And raising her eyebrows meant that she wanted to kill someone. If the Empress was happy, he would also be very happy. Emotions were contagious, whether it was happiness or sadness. Looking at that exquisite face, which was still full of heroic spirit after letting go of her coldness, but also had a unique charm that was unique to her, Rinpoche felt that if he could live for 200 years, he would definitely coax her for 176 years. Those 24 years were the days before him. Chapter 303. Rinpoche looked at the people below him. They seemed to be much better than yesterday, and their attitudes were also much more respectful. Today we'll talk about physics. Rinpoche said to everyone. Logically speaking, he should talk about the written language first, but he still felt that he should arouse everyone's interest first. After all, this wasn't Earth, and the Aboriginals didn't have the habit of studying. He had to let them maintain a certain level of interest in learning. Everyone below looked at him attentively. It seemed that the words he said yesterday had some effect. For the first lesson, let's talk about the motion of objects. Rinpoche picked up a stone and placed it on the podium. Is this stone stationary or moving? It's still, someone answered immediately. Rinpoche nodded, picked up the stone, and let it fall to the ground with a soft sound. Was the rock still or moving? We're falling. Answer whether it's stationary or moving. Rinpoche emphasized. Sports. Can a rock move? Rinpoche asked. Everyone was stunned when they heard this question. Could the stone move? Rinpoche picked up the stone and moved it up and down with his hand. Is the stone still or moving now? What still is your hand? In that case. Rinpoche loosened his grip again and let the stone fall to the ground. Is it stationary or moving? Teacher, the rock is falling down. The rock itself can't move, but it will move when it falls down. Tong Lan was the first to react. You're half right. You are sitting on a carriage or on the back of a horse. The horse is moving forward and everything around it is moving backward. Who's moving? You said the mount is moving? But you didn't move, but your mount and your position didn't change. Instead, everything around you is moving backwards. What I want to tell you is that stillness and movement are relative. This stone is in my hand and relative to my hand it is still. But compared to this classroom or all of you, this stone is moving. You fell from the sky. You didn't move, but everything around you was moving. Mechanical motion is the most common motion in the universe. Everything in nature moves, but it depends on what the reference is. Humans are born with a good nature. Their natures are alike, but their habits differ. If one does not teach, one's nature will change. In the way of teaching, the most important thing is to be focused. In the past, Mencius's mother chose a neighbor. If you don't learn, you'll break the rules. Rinpoche used a piece of chalk to write Chinese characters on the blackboard. He wrote down the first 5 paragraphs of the 3-character classic, a total of 60 characters. Then he wrote the corresponding words of this world below each character. You have to write it all down and memorize it. Humans are just like that. Idiot, the character for Ji is a dot, a horizontal fold, and a restrain. What is that thing of yours? Who is Mother Meng? Let me tell you a story called Mencius's Mother Moved 3 Times. For today's homework, you must write these 30 words 10 times and hand them in tomorrow. Bring your own paper and pen. If you don't have it, just ask me. Answer me again. What's 6 plus 3? If you dare to say 11, I will kill you right now. Rinpoche roared with a ferocious look on his face. His hand was already touching the Type 81 rifle. A tall and sturdy young man looked around blankly, then his eyes lit up. 6 plus 3 is 8. Bang. Remember how to write each number from 1 to 10. Today's math homework. 2 plus 7 plus? For plus 9 equals? When Rinpoche was in school, he had thought of volunteering as a teacher after graduation to leave a memory for his life. However, he became addicted to Bilibili and threw this idea to the back of his mind. He didn't expect that he would become a new generation of assisting teachers in remote areas. This could be considered as fulfilling his original dream of volunteering as a teacher. Seeing that everyone had left the school, Rinpoche clutched his chest and felt that he was going to have a heart attack from anger. He remembered the news that he had seen in the past. Parents who accompanied their children to do homework were so angry that they suffered heart attacks and cerebral hemorrhages. What are you guys? I'm a total of 49 idiots. Sigh, let's take it slow. Rinpoche finally sighed, got the guards to tidy up the classroom, closed the school doors and returned to the palace. How was it? The Empress asked Rinpoche with a smile. Rinpoche hadn't returned to the palace yet, but the Empress already knew about his rant at the school. They are a little stupid, but they can still be saved, Rinpoche said after thinking for a while. Although he was infuriated by those idiots just now, he knew that learning wasn't something that could be done in a day or two. The scene of his old teacher pointing at him and saying that he was a good-for-nothing was still vivid in his mind. He didn't want to easily deny the future of these people. The role of a gardener was to water the flowers so that the flowers could grow, bud, and finally bloom. The Empress nodded. It was good that Rinpoche could say this. After lunch, Rinpoche met a few people at Pingle Park. They were the shopkeepers of the 2 caravans in the palace. I have seen what you have done over the years and I can't say that it's good. Look at your list. This kind of sour wine actually costs 10 taels of silver for a jar? 30 taels of silver for a bolt of silk? Also, the final price of the things that you sell are far lower than the market price. If not for the fact that you have always been relatively honest, I would have suspected that you are secretly helping outsiders. Rinpoche patted the paper on the table and said, Sir Rin, it's not that we want to do this. It's just that they are buying our goods at low prices. If we don't sell them at low prices, we simply can't sell them. Also, we know that the prices of these goods are expensive, but we really have no choice. Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the expressions of the 2 shopkeepers immediately turned ugly. They looked as if they had been wronged. If you really have any problems, you should know Her Majesty's temperament. As for me, you will know in the future. I will be in charge of this aspect in the future, and you have to report to me. I am different from Her Majesty. Her Majesty has too many things to worry about every day, and she can't be bothered with these things. I'm not that easy to talk to. If you do a good job, you will be rewarded. If you don't do a good job, you will be punished. I hope that all of you will do your part. Naturally, I will not treat you unfairly. Otherwise, think about the consequences. He didn't know whether these 2 shopkeepers were secretly helping outsiders. In any case, no matter how he looked at the list, there was something wrong. No matter what, he had to give them a warning first. The goods this year are different from the previous years. This year we have these 2 things. Rinpoche opened a box beside his feet, took out a goblet and a classical cup, and placed them on the table. Following which he took out 2 mirrors. Both of you take a look. How much can these things be sold for? These are cups. They are so clear and transparent. I wonder what material is used to make them. I think they can be sold for at least 500 taels of silver each. These mirrors are also different from copper mirrors. They are actually so clear. They will be sold for at least 1,000 taels of silver each. The 2 shopkeepers took a careful look at the cups one after another. Their faces revealed an astonished expression. The cups were completely transparent, and even the fine hairs on their faces could be seen clearly in the mirror. Rinpoche looked at the 2 of them carefully and asked, Don't tell me you are spies sent by other countries? Sir. The 2 of them were shocked. These cups are sold for at least 5,000 taels of silver each. They are completely carved out of clear and transparent gemstones. You are telling me that these craftsmanship and materials are worth 500 taels of silver each? And this mirror, it is so clear and bright that it can reflect the scene perfectly. It will be sold for at least 30,000 taels of silver. One had to know that when Venice first produced mercury mirrors, they were still covered with tinfoil. At that time, they already cost 150,000 French francs. Not to mention, these mirrors with more perfect craftsmanship were worth 30,000 taels of silver. If not for the high production rate and the fact that glass would appear in many places in Dayo in a few years, he would have wanted to sell them as soon as possible to make a fortune. He even wanted to raise the price a little. Sir, no one will accept this price, the 2 shopkeepers whispered. Are you fools? Rinpoche almost poked their heads with his finger. There are many brothels in those 2 countries, right? Find the best brothel and give them a sum of money. Let their most popular courtesan hold 2 cups and auction them on the spot. The highest bidder wins. Let me tell you, brothels are the places with the most childs. They are also the places that can fetch the highest price. Sell a pair of cups in one place and then sell them in another city. The brothels are easy to deal with. Give them 1,000 taels of silver and all the money will go to us. Otherwise we can split the profits with them. If not, Give them 500 taels of silver. During the auction, the starting price will be 5,000 taels of silver. We will give them the extra money. Do you think they will agree? Or you can find an influential child and give him a pair of cups. The request is nothing else but for him to introduce this item to others. When the time comes, you will give him a commission. For each cup that he sells, you will give him another 500 taels of silver. Once you have made a name for yourself, there will naturally be people who will take the initiative to buy it from you. As for this mirror, you have to remember this saying: love lasts forever and the silver mirror will last forever. This mirror is the best token of love to give to your sweetheart. As for those who have been married before, what else in this world is more precious than a mirror that can reflect your own appearance? Men's mouths are all fake. Only this mirror will not lie to you. Ren Bachin gave the two of them a sales lesson for 4 hours in a row, and both of them were dumbfounded after listening to him. Chapter 304. Remember, who are our customers this time? It was the local tyrants, the officials, the aristocratic families, and the ambitious people. Why should we sell things to them? Because only they should have these things and they deserve to have them. Because only our things can highlight their identity and value. Only then can they show their nobility, and only then can they get what they want. Whether it's for their own use, for their dream lover, or for their boss. Doesn't he want to have it? It doesn't matter, let his opponent have it first. For the next few days, Rinpoche would teach the disciples of the academy in the morning, practice boxing in the afternoon, or get beaten up by Tong Lan. At night, he would teach the two shopkeepers of the caravan whose heads were made of wood. What sales? Rinpoche sat on a stone chair in Pingle Park. The two shopkeepers, who were in their 40s or 50s, were standing obediently like primary school students. These few days had broadened their horizons. Solving the needs of our customers. The two shopkeepers immediately answered. How do we do sales? Create demand for our customers. Rinpoche nodded slightly. These two wooden heads could finally understand some logic. What's our product? It's our identity and value. People need to increase their value through external objects. The two shopkeepers were full of jargon. If the Empress were to see them, she would be shocked. Okay, remember, we aren't selling products but identity. Self-expression. High positions and generous salaries. The only thing we aren't selling is products, Rinpoche summarized for them. Yes, sir. The two nodded in unison with a look of conviction. They really didn't know where this man in front of them learned these things from. The two of them felt that they had benefited a lot from these few days of lessons. Now, even if they were given a pile of feces, they would sell it for the price of gold. You may leave. Memorize today's lessons well and set off in 2 days. Rinpoche waved his hand. Sir, we will record everything every day when we go back and compare it with each other, the two of them said respectfully. Well, when you do it, you will know what self-worth is. Rinpoche waved his hand to get the guards to send them out of the palace. After the two of them left, he felt a little regretful that the time was too short. Otherwise, he could have tried what a pyramid scheme was. Right now, they could only rely on what they had learned over the past few days. Fortunately, with his products, he didn't have any competitors, so he didn't have to worry. Even if there were some twists and turns, he believed that the two of them would give him a satisfactory answer. The goods he had prepared were 2,000 goblets, 2,000 vintage cups, and 1,000 silver mirrors. However, it wasn't all at once. Instead, it was divided into 4 trips. The first time, the quantity was the least, and the second time, the quantity gradually increased. Of course, the price was the highest for the first time, and then it gradually decreased. His goal was to earn more than 30 million taels of silver from Dayo and the Yun nation for this batch of goods. This was a huge sum of money for Dayo. Great Xia's annual treasury revenue was 100 million taels of silver, the Yun nation's treasury revenue was 31 million taels of silver, and the Qin nation's treasury revenue was 22 million taels of silver. As for Dayo, which was equivalent to the combined size of the Yun nation and the Qin nation, its annual treasury revenue was only 7 million taels of silver. Half of the income came from the remnant citizens of the Hao nation in the southern region. Out of these 7 million taels of silver, 3 million taels of silver would be spent on military expenses every year. For an army of 100,000, excluding food and some basic armaments, each soldier would only receive 12 taels of silver a year, which was equivalent to 1 tael of silver a month. One had to know that the weakest soldier in Dayo was at the Manwil level. In other countries, the same level of strength would receive at least 6 to 10 times the salary. It was no wonder that the protectorates of Dayo were reduced to relying on the income from brothels to supplement their income. As for the remaining 4 million taels of silver, it was used for the salaries of all the officials in Dayo, the monthly salaries of the craftsmen and odd-job workers, city repairs and so on. There was almost no surplus. As a result, Dayo basically didn't have any spare energy to build infrastructure. Even the official roads were only flattened with dirt. The imperial treasury had been buying weapons to replenish the army year after year, and basically didn't have much money left. The additional 8,000 taels of silver for cultivation had shrunk the Empress's treasury by a large margin in 3 months. At most, it could only last for another 3 months. Ren Baqian's monthly cultivation expenses were about 50,000 taels of silver. In other words, other than those rare and precious items, the Empress's treasury only had 300,000 taels of silver. This included the gold, silver, and jewelry that were sent by people from other countries for this year's birthday celebration. Ren Baqian carefully calculated the accounts and felt that it wasn't easy for the Empress to be an Empress. Fortunately, the Empress was willing to do this and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. The Empress was probably the poorest among all the civilized countries on Earth and in this world, with the exception of the African brothers. Even the Empress was like this, let alone the ministers. Ren Baqian pondered about the situation in Dayo for a while. Earning a sum of money would only solve the urgent situation. Dayo still had a long way to go. He put aside his thoughts and decided to take it step by step. Lying on the bed, he entered a spacious and empty space. In the entire space there was only a towering tree in the middle. It was unknown how tall it was. The crown of the tree covered a radius of more than 10 kilometers and there were countless green vines twining around the trunk. This was the second visualization after breaking through the visualization of water, the visualization of wood. Water was related to wood. Therefore, after completing the visualization of water, he didn't need to visualize anything else and directly entered the visualization of wood. The 5 elements corresponded to the 5 internal organs. The visualization of water corresponded to the kidneys and the visualization of wood corresponded to the liver. Ren Baqian's current practice was to climb up the tree trunk and vines. However, as long as he was more than 3 meters above the ground, the surrounding wind would blow like a storm from all directions, making it difficult for him to even breathe. His entire body had to cling to the tree trunk and vines with difficulty. While resisting the strong wind to stabilize his body, he climbed up bit by bit. When his strength was exhausted, he would be blown down and directly exit the visualization of wood. After a while, Ren Baqian was blown down from a height of 5 meters. When he woke up, he was already back on the bed and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Ren Baqian first took a medicinal bath and then went to Jianghu Palace Hall. Today was the school's day off. Ren Baqian had brought the big week from Earth over. Previously, when the students had a break, Ren Baqian took the opportunity to return to Earth to order some things. Today he and the Empress returned to Earth to collect them. These included the teaching materials that the students needed. Elementary school mathematics from grade 1 to grade 6, junior high school physics and chemistry materials, a volume of the 3-character classic, and some experimental materials. Originally, Ren Baqian had considered the rules for disciples, and the Analects of Confucius. However, after thinking about it, he gave up. This world was different from Earth, and the aboriginals were different from ordinary people. The biggest difference was that the importance of martial arts in this world was much greater than that on Earth. Mechanically applying the words of Confucius might not necessarily be good. When Ren Baqian walked into Jianghu Palace Hall, he saw a red shadow flashing and moving in the hall. At the same time, it was as if there was a strong wind blowing in the hall. Following every movement of the Empress, he could feel the strong wind blowing in the hall. Ren Baqian took a closer look and realized that the Empress was practicing a set of boxing techniques that he didn't know the name of. Every time her fists struck out, there would be a loud sound of breaking the air. Ren Baqian quietly watched from the side. Rather than saying that he was watching the Empress practice, it would be better to say that he was watching that figure. In any case, he couldn't understand the movements of the Empress. In fact, he couldn't even see them clearly. After a while, the Empress suddenly stopped moving. She slowly lowered both her hands. It was as though water vapor was spurting out from her palms and directly smashed onto the green tiles below. It was unknown what material the floor tiles of Jianghu Palace Hall were made of, but they actually didn't break. "How much do you understand?" the Empress turned and asked him. "You are indeed worthy of being called Your Majesty. I can't even see your movements clearly. However, I will try my best to keep up with your Majesty's footsteps. In time, I might be able to see the mystery of your Majesty's boxing technique." Rinpoche immediately gave her a thumbs up. The Empress stared at him and subconsciously gritted her teeth. Just now, she had deliberately slowed down her movements, but this bastard actually didn't see it at all. There is no need to wait for time. From today onwards, you will practice this boxing technique with me. The Empress snorted. Your Majesty, we have changed our departure today. Previously we said that we are going to the amusement park. Rinpoche said with a smile. Ever since the Empress watched Final Destination 3, she couldn't forget about the amusement park. Chapter 306. In a room there were several computers. Each screen was divided into 9 screens, monitoring various locations in the neighborhood, including the elevator, the underground parking lot, and the entrance of the neighborhood. All the surveillance cameras in the neighborhood were connected to this place. However, this wasn't a surveillance room. It was a 3-bedroom house in the neighborhood. Because the curtains were drawn every day, strangers would come in and out from time to time. Someone thought that they were doing some illegal activities and called the police. When the police came yesterday, the people in the room were confused. They only sent the police away when someone took out their ID. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people in the room were speechless when they thought about it. The residents of this neighborhood were almost as vigilant as the omnipotent Jianghu people. How do you think they found us? A short-haired woman looked at the surveillance camera impatiently. They were originally watching the house opposite with binoculars. As long as the other party came back, they would find out. However, they suddenly found out that they were exposed. They moved here in a hurry and stared at the surveillance camera every day. Who knows? Don't forget the instructions from above. They aren't ordinary people. Another young man wearing glasses took out a cylindrical metal object and took a puff. Then he puffed out a large amount of smoke. After a few puffs, the room became like a fairyland. This thing smells much better than your cigarette. The short-haired woman turned her head and said. The young man with glasses spread his hands. I wanted to smoke. But since you had such a big reaction, I changed it to this. However, this electronic cigarette is not bad. It's much better than I thought. You're sensible this time. The short-haired woman leaned on the table. Last time, those 2 people suddenly appeared in the room. Is there really such a thing as a superpower in this world? Who should I ask? The boss might know. You can ask the boss. The young man with glasses took out a glass bottle from the side and used a dropper to draw some solution on the electronic cigarette. Then he began to puff again. Looking at his intoxicated expression, it was obvious that he was smoking an electronic cigarette. Those who didn't know would think that he was smoking DU. They're back. The woman quickly patted the young man with glasses. On the screen in the upper left corner, a person suddenly opened the window. It can't be a housekeeper, right? The young man looked at the screen. The angle was from the bottom up. He couldn't see the inside of the house, only the window. This was also to prevent the other party from discovering them again. No, this isn't the time for housekeeping, the short-haired woman said. After that, the 2 of them began to focus on the monitor. After the target appeared, the 2 of them had to constantly pay attention to when the other party left. If it was before, it would be fine. They could just use the binoculars to see when the person in the room left, but now they had to constantly stare at the surveillance camera. No wonder she looked so unwilling. Why do you think we're watching them? The short-haired woman still couldn't figure out the problem. Her previous missions all had a mission objective, and she knew what she had to do. But this time he didn't do anything at all. He just kept an eye on them and reported their itinerary. It had already been a few months and there were still no orders from above. You can ask boss, I don't know. Of course, Rinpoche didn't know that the last time he cheated them, the 2 of them had to stay in a small room for more than 20 days and were full of resentment. He pushed open the window. The weather today was pretty good. Earth had already entered the beginning of May. The weather during the day was over 20 degrees, and the sun was shining brightly. It was a good time to go out and play. When he opened the window and turned around, he heard the sound of the door closing. The Empress had gone to change her clothes. She didn't even eat her ice cream. From this, it could be seen how impatient the Empress was. It was hard to imagine why the Empress was so interested in the amusement park. By the time he went upstairs and changed into a hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, the Empress had already changed into a dress and was sitting on the sofa eating ice cream. Sure enough, to the Empress, eating was something that couldn't be neglected. It was just a matter of time. Let's go to the amusement park. Ren Baqin snapped his fingers and the Empress threw a pillow at his face. I feel that action isn't very respectful. The Empress nibbled on the ice cream and looked at him from the corner of her eyes. How can that be? It's just an action to emphasize my tone. For example, eat your fill. Ren Baqin snapped his fingers again and another pillow was thrown at his face. Your Majesty, it's time to set off. Ren Baqin stretched out his right hand, held 3 of the Empress's fingers and bent down. Not bad. The Empress was very satisfied. She helped him tidy up the hat on the back of his head. Her fingers were clean again. Otherwise, the melted ice cream would be sticky on her fingers. When they went out, the elevator stopped at the 7th floor. A young girl came in and was surprised to see the 2 of them. Then she bowed to them. Thank you for that time. The girl thanked him. Even though she went to look for Ren Baqin and wanted to treat him to a meal, she was rejected. Now, when she thought about the fire incident, she still felt a lingering fear. Therefore, when she saw Ren Baqin, she immediately expressed her gratitude. Coincidentally, the collar of the girl's shirt was quite big. Ren Baqin naturally took a glance. Pow! The Empress slapped Ren Baqin's nose. Ouch! Ren Baqin groaned in pain and covered his nose. The Empress didn't even look at him from the side. How did she know? His nose was a little wet. When he stretched out his hand to touch it, there was a smear of red. There was really blood flowing down. Ren Baqin quickly raised his head, took out a roll of money from his pocket, and stuffed it into his nose. Why did you hit me? Ren Baqin stuffed his nose and spoke in a muffled voice. Just now, he clearly saw that the Empress didn't even turn her head to look at him. Intuition. The Empress turned her head and looked at Ren Baqin. Ren Baqin, Your Majesty, you have definitely watched too many Final Destination movies. You just wanted to hit me all of a sudden, right? In any case, it didn't matter if you hit me indiscriminately. Even if you hit me wrongly, it would be in vain. When the girl saw the 2 of them covering their mouths and giggling softly, she saw Ren Baqin glaring at her and quickly said softly, Sorry, I couldn't help it. When Ren Baqin walked out of the elevator, he took a glance at the acrylic mirror at the side. There was a roll of money stuck in his nose like an elephant, but it was a pity that it wasn't very symmetrical. The 2 of them drove all the way to the amusement park, which was the largest amusement park in Shurching. From outside, they could hear the rumbling and screams of the roller coaster inside. The Empress's attention was immediately attracted by it. That's the one. The Empress's eyes lit up. It seemed like Final Destination 3 had really left a deep impression on her. Even when she came to the amusement park, she went straight for the roller coaster. It was unknown if it was because the weather was too good, but there were people everywhere. Many of them were parents with their children, and there were also pairs of couples. Chapter 307. Even though the amusement park wasn't crowded, there were still quite a lot of people. In particular, there were more people in front of the roller coaster. After all, there weren't many things for adults to play in this amusement park. The 2 of them queued for more than half an hour. The Empress was eating ice cream as if nothing had happened while Ren Baqin was playing with his phone with one hand and holding the Empress with the other. Will there be any problems? The Empress suddenly asked. Ren Baqin looked at the Empress and had a bad premonition. Normally, the probability of a roller coaster malfunctioning was similar to that of a plane crashing down. However, the Empress couldn't forget the performance of the Return of the Grim Reaper and suddenly said these words. He was afraid that even if there weren't any problems, she would still create problems. A certain great man once said, if there are difficulties, you have to face them. If there aren't any difficulties, you have to create them. The Empress couldn't possibly be doing this to satisfy the excitement of imitating a movie, right? Actually, I have a fear of heights. I will wait for you below. Ren Baqin saw that the people in front had already started to enter. After saying this, he turned around and was ready to stop the roller coaster at any time. The Empress moved faster than him and grabbed his collar. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't escape. Are you going to leave me alone? The Empress asked. She pointed to the surroundings and saw that there were only 2 people in pairs. Then, she looked at the last bit of egg roll in her hand reluctantly and threw it into her mouth. If I don't go up, they will thank me, Ren Baqin whispered in a serious tone. The Empress didn't say a word. She dragged him forward and conveniently rubbed against his clothes. Ren Baqin was shocked when he saw her reaction. Had he guessed correctly? Are you serious? However, he didn't dare to shout. Feeling the strength of the Empress pulling his collar, he grabbed the railing at the side. I won't go up even if you beat me to death. The surrounding people looked at the 2 of them and found it funny. This man was too timid. If his girlfriend was so beautiful, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid even if he went up a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, let alone riding a roller coaster. However, this woman's hands were so strong that the man's fingers turned white as he held onto the railing. Then the Empress poked Rinpoche's lower back. Rinpoche finally quietened down. His entire body went limp and he couldn't exert any strength at all. After fastening his seatbelt and pressing down on the U-shaped seatbelt, he finally regained some strength. He looked at the Empress nervously and whispered, "They are all ordinary people. If something happens, it will be a big problem." The Empress turned to look at him with a smile that was as beautiful as a flower. "It's okay, I'll be gentle." Rinpoche was about to spit out blood. Anything that happened on the roller coaster would be a big deal. What was the use of being gentle? These words were not comforting at all. Rinpoche observed 3 minutes of silence for the people on the roller coaster and hoped that nothing serious would happen later on. Following the ringing of the bell, the roller coaster began to move forward slowly, and Rinpoche's heart began to race. At first it was still all right. The speed was very slow and it kept moving upwards. Rinpoche felt a little dizzy looking at the ground below him. Rinpoche's heart began to beat faster as the roller coaster rapidly descended. As the roller coaster moved at a high speed, it made a 360-degree turn in the air from time to time. Rinpoche gripped the seatbelt tightly and let out a miserable howl. Ah dash! Bang! Rinpoche suddenly heard such a sound. Before he could react, his entire body began to lose gravity. If it wasn't for the fact that he was still holding onto the seatbelt with both hands, he would have been flung out. However, the seatbelt was now being lifted up. *CK. Rinpoche was really howling this time around. Help! His miserable howl could cover half of the amusement park. He thought that the Empress would tamper with the roller coaster, but he didn't expect her to tamper with his seatbelt. Fortunately, the Empress's small hand grabbed onto Rinpoche's clothes at the waist, which made him feel relieved. Then the Empress actually let go. She let go. She let go. Rinpoche was going crazy. She was trying to murder her husband. At this moment, the seatbelt was completely unbuckled, and the seatbelt on his body was also broken. Rinpoche held onto the seatbelt tightly and looked like a kite fluttering in the wind. Then, the Empress suddenly extended her arm and grabbed his wrist, making him feel a little safer. However, at the same time, the Empress's other hand gently knocked on the seatbelt, and the metal seatbelt immediately broke. Rinpoche held onto the broken seatbelt with both hands and was fluttering in the wind while being held by the Empress. A dash! Rinpoche's howl became even more miserable. At the same time, many people below also realized that there was a problem with the roller coaster, and many people cried out in alarm. In the eyes of outsiders, the boyfriend's seatbelt broke, and his girlfriend held onto him tightly without letting go. Such a scene that always appeared in movies appeared in front of everyone's eyes. How touching was this scene? Many people below took out their phones and started to take pictures. At the same time, they felt that they had no regrets in life with such a girlfriend. However, at this moment, Rinpoche even had the intention to kill someone. At this moment, the roller coaster's controller realized that there was a problem and hurriedly slowed down and stopped the roller coaster. Then everyone was hung in the sky. However, Rinpoche was especially miserable at this moment. One of his hands was tightly held by the Empress, and the other hand was tightly holding onto the body of the car. With more than 600 kilograms of strength, the car was almost out of shape, but he didn't let go at all. Finally, he was rescued with great difficulty, and Rinpoche was about to go crazy from anger. Although he had the strength to ensure that even if the seatbelt was unbuckled, he would still be able to hold onto the shoulder straps and not fall, but he couldn't play like this. He had acrophobia. "Sir, I'm really sorry. Do you want to go to the hospital first? The person in charge is on the way here." A staff member at the side hurriedly came forward to welcome him. "Ignore me." Rinpoche's face was full of irritation. Even a clay figurine would have some anger. Rinpoche felt that he needed to express his attitude. Ever since he was rescued, he had been putting on a straight face. After the Empress came down, he didn't look at her and only said, "I don't want to play anymore. Let's go back." Even a blind person could hear the coldness and resentment in his voice. It's indeed meaningless. The Empress propped her chin with one finger and turned her head to look at her surroundings. This roller coaster was more boring than she had imagined, but she still wanted to go to some other places to play. However, seeing Rinpoche's completely different tone, she first blinked her eyes and then looked pensive. There were actually many people at the side who applauded the Empress and praised her for holding on to her boyfriend tightly and not letting go. Ren Baqin felt even more depressed. After the two of them walked for a while, the Empress's cold and puzzled voice sounded, "Are you angry?" "Very angry." Ren Baqin lowered his head to look for money on the ground and didn't look at her. "Look at me." The Empress grabbed his arm. Ren Baqin turned his head to the other side. Then a soft hand pulled his chin back. The Empress's eyes were always bright, clear and pure like a lake, but at this moment, they were somewhat flickering. Looking at the resentment on Ren Baqin's face, the Empress blinked her eyes and pulled Ren Baqin's face closer to her. She kissed him. It was a little cold, very soft, and had an alluring fragrance. Ren Baqin felt his heart beating like a pile driver. Thump, thump, thump. What kind of situation was this? Ren Baqin's eyes widened. The Empress blushed from her ears to her face. She lowered her head slightly and didn't look at his eyes. Her eyes were filled with embarrassment. Cough cough. Since you already know your mistake and have reflected deeply on it, let's go for another spin. Ren Baqin suddenly felt that it was just a roller coaster. It wasn't impossible to consider going for another more exciting ride. Chapter 308. Ah! An earth-shattering scream was heard from the drop-off machine in the amusement park. When the drop-off machine was rapidly descending, a man's seatbelt suddenly broke and he almost fell off. Fortunately, the lady beside him caught him. Not only was the man screaming, but the other people on the drop-off machine were also screaming, and their screams were even louder. After all, everyone's hearts were about to jump out of their chests when something like that happened around them. When the drop-off machine landed, everyone ran off as if they were running for their lives. The long queue instantly retreated a few meters. Who would dare to do such a thing after such a thing happened? Ren Baqin was sweating profusely. Even though he knew that the Empress would catch him, his heart was still in turmoil. "Sir, are you all right?" The staff hurriedly ran up to him. "I'm all right? I don't look like I'm all right. Don't worry about me. I'll take a rest." Ren Baqin felt his legs turn to jelly. At this moment, not only did Ren Baqin's legs turn to jelly, but the staff at the amusement park also felt their legs turn to jelly. Such an incident had just happened on the roller coaster, and the roller coaster was still under maintenance. They didn't know how long it would take before it could run again. Now, such an incident had happened to the drop-off machine. Seeing that the two people had left without a word, the staff couldn't possibly stop them. No matter how these two people were going to cause trouble for the amusement park in the future, it was the responsibility of the person in charge. Furthermore, who knew if these two people were going to make a phone call to cause trouble now? When the person in charge of the amusement park rushed over and saw the person on the surveillance camera, he was confused at first, and then his expression changed. Previously, this was the person who had an accident on the roller coaster. Now it was him again. How could it be such a coincidence? Furthermore, the cause of the accident was the same. The seatbelt had broken. And both times he didn't want any compensation, not even an examination. He just left without saying a word. He wouldn't believe that these two people were alright even if he was beaten to death. However, how did the seatbelt break? One had to know that the seatbelt wasn't made of nylon rope, but metal, and it couldn't be broken by humans. Could it be that these two people were really a coincidence? The person in charge now had a balance in his heart. On one side, the two people were here to cause trouble, and on the other side it was really a coincidence. At this moment, both ends of the balance were constantly moving up and down. One moment, the left side was tilted, and the next moment, the right side was tilted. Ren Baqin looked at the Empress with a do-as-you-see-fit expression on his face. The Empress lowered her head and hesitated for a long time. She then used the tip of her foot to rub against the ground. Finally, she created a hole in the ground. Then he gritted his teeth, raised his head, and moved toward Ren Baqin. Oh! Last time there was still a little feeling, but this time not only did he not feel any charm or softness, he only felt sore and numb, and tears were about to come out. He didn't know if it was intentional or not, but the Empress's nose directly bumped into his. It looked like a light bump, but the strength of the Empress's body was comparable to that of steel. She didn't feel anything at all. Ren Baqin immediately covered his nose and tears welled up in his eyes. His nose was bleeding like tap water. A moment later, Ren Baqin stuffed 100 yuan bill into each of his nostrils and looked at the Empress with bright eyes. He made up his mind and kissed her. This time the Empress wouldn't seriously injure him, right? As the saying goes, first time unfamiliar, second time familiar. Then, the Empress raised her chin slightly, and the two red ivory tusks that protruded from the nose directly poked the Empress's face. Ren Baqin covered his nose again, and this time his tears really came out. This was the first time he knew how painful it was to have money stuck in his nose. "I think I need to go to the hospital." At this moment Ren Baqin's eyes were brimming with tears. He pulled the money out and threw it aside. His nose was extremely painful. Previously, it was only the bridge of his nose that hurt, but this time, it was the inside of his nose that hurt. He suspected that if he used more strength, the two bills would poke into his brain. At that time, his brain would really be filled with money. Seeing that Ren Baqin was really crying this time, the Empress blushed shyly and leaned over to give him a light peck on his lips. The blood that flowed from Ren Baqin's lips also stained her red lips. The Empress stuck out her tongue and gently licked her lips. Her face became even redder. Feeling the softness that he had just touched and looking at the Empress's actions, Ren Baqin suddenly felt that he could actually persevere for a little longer. "Let's go to the overturning seas and rivers." Ren Baqin pinched his nose and pointed into the distance. It was just like when he pointed to the distance and said, "Our journey is in the sea of stars." In his heart, he inexplicably thought of a famous musician who once said very artistic words. Life isn't just about the present, there are also poems and beautiful women. The overturning seas and rivers was also a large-scale amusement park. There was a rack that was 20 meters tall, and when people sat on it, they would be lifted up to a height of tens of meters. Then they would rotate 720 degrees in the air for 2 rounds before being lifted up to another direction and rotated 720 degrees for 2 rounds. The excitement wasn't any less than that of a jump tower. One had to know that it was a 720-degree rotation from a height of 20 to 30 meters. Ren Baqin felt that he had already given it his all today. However, the others didn't want him to give it his all. When the two of them arrived at the overturning seas and rivers amusement park, they realized that there wasn't a single queue in front of them. After all, there had already been 2 incidents at the amusement park today. How stupid would they have to be to continue playing such a dangerous attraction? Then the staff member looked at Ren Baqin, who had unwiped bloodstains on his face and body as if he had run from the scene of a car accident. "All the large-scale attractions have been closed for inspection today." "Closed for inspection? There's no other way. We can't play anymore." Ren Baqin didn't know if he should feel regret or rejoice. However, 2 incidents had happened consecutively. Even if the boss of the amusement park was a fool, he would still conduct an inspection. The Empress furrowed her eyebrows and was a little dissatisfied. The previous 2 incidents weren't very fun. Initially, when she looked at this amusement park from afar, she felt that it would be more fun than the previous 2. After the 2 of them left, the person in charge heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the news. Just now, when he heard that the 2 of them were heading towards the overturning seas and rivers, he immediately asked someone to stop the equipment. He couldn't stop the equipment even if he didn't. After the previous 2 incidents, no one dared to play today. At the same time, he was certain that the 2 of them were definitely here to cause trouble. It was a pity that he didn't have any evidence. Otherwise he would definitely teach them a lesson. However, he was also somewhat puzzled. If the other party was here to cause trouble, why didn't they take the opportunity to blow things up and not ask for any compensation? Furthermore, the 2 safety belts weren't cut off by someone. Instead, they seemed to have been cut off normally. The cut wasn't neat. These 2 points were what he couldn't understand. In any case, the reputation of the amusement park would definitely be tarnished this time. If these 2 incidents were to spread, it was unknown how many customers would be lost. At the very least, it would definitely be greatly affected before this incident was put to rest. Ren Baqin and the Empress returned to the car. Ren Baqin looked at the Empress beside him and had the urge to turn his head and kiss her. This was probably the meaning of the phrase, tasting the marrow. In particular, the previous 2 incidents were like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. He really wanted to have a good taste of it. Unfortunately, the Empress didn't know if she knew what he was thinking. She raised her hand and was ready to slap Ren Baqin's face at any time. Of course, if she really wanted to slap him, Ren Baqin wouldn't be able to react in time. This action of hers was more of a deterrent than anything else. Ren Baqin grabbed her hand, put it in front of his nose, sniffed it, and gently kissed her fingers. The Empress's ears turned red again. Then she bashfully and flirtatiously slapped Ren Baqin's nose. "Let's change the location next time," Ren Baqin said with tears in his eyes as he fumbled to find a tissue to stuff his nose. A while ago she was a thug. Why did she change to slap his nose today? Your Majesty, where did you learn this from? P.S. Recommending a friend's new book, Little Cultivation Streamer. In an era when the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was scarce, cultivators had already gone into hiding. On a certain live streaming platform, a masked male streamer appeared. He would lead the netizens to unveil the mysterious veil of the cultivation world step by step. Thank you to Kunlun Mountain for the rocket. Thank you to Kongtong Sect for the plane. Let's go 666 again. I'm going to perform my physical body to withstand the lightning tribulation. Chapter 309. After Rinpoche and the Empress left the amusement park, they found a place to have a meal. The place was quite exquisite. Halfway through their meal, they heard the sound of an eru coming from outside. It was played with a loud sound system. The tune was very familiar and Rinpoche almost sang along. Back then you wanted to separate, so we separated. Rinpoche was shocked. This was a divine tune. He turned around and saw a man dragging a small cart with a sound system. He was holding an eru in his hand and was playing it at the entrance of the restaurant. Rinpoche's musical heart was immediately ignited. He recalled his eru that had been miserably suppressed. It was a sunny afternoon. Rinpoche followed the owner of the restaurant out to deal with that man and threw 100 yuan to him. Lend me a tune. Unplug the sound system, it's too noisy. Then he took that man's eru and sat at the side to tune it. Previously, when that man was playing the eru at the entrance of the restaurant with a sound system, everyone knew what was going on and felt disgusted. However, at this time, they saw that it was a clean and handsome young man tuning there. Many people also saw that he had given that person 100 yuan, so they immediately became interested. After all, in this city there weren't many street performances like this. The Empress sat by the window and watched Rinpoche holding the thing from last time. She was a little curious. After all, that man wasn't playing that badly. She wondered what Rinpoche was going to do this time. After Rinpoche was done tuning, he began to play the eru with an intoxicated look on his face. The tune of Psychopath's song flowed out along with the horizontal movements of his hands. The tune was very cheerful. Even though the passers-by couldn't tell what tune it was, it sounded pretty good. Many people stopped to watch. 10 seconds later, the tune started to sound a little weird, and then the style changed. A few short noises came out of his hands, like an old hen or an owl laughing at you. The crowd, who originally thought it was pretty good, was caught off guard by this sudden change in style. They were dumbfounded. What was going on? Then they saw Rinpoche's hands fluttering left and right. The crowd seemed to see an old hen flapping its wings and laughing at them non-stop. It was the kind of laughter that ridiculed them. Everyone felt that they were being ridiculed. They were being ridiculed by an eru spirit, who said that humans couldn't become spirits after the founding of the People's Republic. Stand up and I promise I won't kill you. Everyone could hear the mockery in that voice. Those who stopped to listen to him play the eru were definitely not anxious people, nor were they in a bad mood. But when Su, who was originally in a good mood, heard this, his mood instantly turned sour. More than half of them raised their middle fingers and left. The Empress covered her forehead with her hand, and the veins on her forehead were bulging. She made up her mind to never let him touch this thing again. The other guests were also speechless. When Rinpoche was finally done, the boss immediately whispered, "Brother, tell me if you're not satisfied with the food. There's no need to do this." Rinpoche's face turned black. Is it that unpleasant? He felt pretty good about himself. She was already half as good as Wuxia on Bilibili. Forget it, you can have it. Rinpoche passed the eru to the person from before. That person received the eru with a dumbfounded look on his face. He felt that he was pretty awesome. No matter who he played that piece of music in front of their house, they would gladly pay for it. He didn't expect that there would always be someone stronger than him. He respectfully handed the 100 yuan to Rinpoche with both hands and said, "Brother, I can't accept this money. Although I'm in this line of work, I know my limits. Brother, please tell me the name of that piece of music and where I can find the score." Rinpoche gave him a thumbs up. He was indeed knowledgeable. He whispered the name into that person's ear, then turned around and entered the restaurant with a carefree look on his face. With a wave of his sleeves, he didn't take away a single cloud. He left behind a bunch of complicated and incomprehensible gazes, the kind that wanted to use a brick to slap him. "Your Majesty, I'll go buy another eru later," Rinpoche said as he sat down. He felt that his pursuit of music shouldn't stop just like that. Everyone had to have dreams. Music is my dream. No way. The Empress immediately smashed a piece of the table with her palm. The boss saw this scene as soon as he came in and felt like crying. Were these two people here to cause trouble? If you touch that thing again. The Empress hesitated for a while and gritted her teeth. I'll tie you up in the plaza to accompany the one who buried you last time. Rinpoche felt that his dream had died prematurely. As soon as he left the restaurant, Rinpoche received a call from his mother. Mom. Rinpoche's face was beaming. After chatting with his mother for a while, she whispered, "Something happened to your brother. Can you find someone to help him?" "What's wrong? What happened?" Rinpoche frowned. "It's like this. Wan Yin got into a fight with someone. Nothing serious happened to both parties, but the other party is unwilling to let him go and refuses to come out of the hospital. We are paying for the medical fees, so it doesn't matter. However, they went to the school and are now punishing Wan Yin." "Why would the school punish Wan Yin for a fight between two people?" Rinpoche was puzzled. "The other party said some nasty words and Wan Yin made the first move. After the fight, Wan Yin's nose was broken and his face was swollen, but he didn't take it seriously. However, that kid was smart and went straight to the hospital and refused to come out. The doctor said that he was fine, but he kept saying that he was in pain. I saw that his family was quite picky and thought that he should just stay in the hospital. Our family doesn't lack this bit of money anyway." Then the other party's family asked for 100,000 yuan to settle the matter privately. Given your father's character, how could he agree? Wan Yin is not to be blamed. Then the other party went to the school. After all, Wan Yin was the one who made the first move, and now the school wants to punish him. I thought that since you have a job now, you should know some people and see if there are any solutions. I got it. Don't worry, it's fine. Rinpoche comforted her. Don't worry about this matter. I will find someone to handle it. There will definitely be no problem. I will give Wan Yin a call first. Rinpoche hung up the phone and immediately called Rinpoche. Brother. Rinpoche's voice sounded normal. What's going on? Rinpoche asked. Some parts of what his mother said just now were unclear, and it was Rinpoche who explained it clearly. It's nothing. I just got into a fight with someone, but his mouth is cheap. Rinpoche was a little indignant. What did he say? Rinpoche asked curiously. That time, didn't you post a photo on your WeChat Moments with a picture of sister-in-law? My roommate saw it. That day, I told others that sister-in-law is very beautiful, but they didn't believe me. So I showed it to them. In the end, that idiot's mouth was cheap and unpleasant, so I got into a fight with him. What did he say? Rinpoche's face was calm, but this time, his voice was much deeper. He said, brother, that you are a taker. If sister-in-law doesn't look for a taker, she won't be able to live in an ordinary family. I scolded him a little, and he said that she is your sister-in-law now, but she might be someone else's wife in the future. Then I got into a fight with him. Why did you get into a fight over such a trivial matter? Tell me about this next time. Alright, I got it. You don't have to worry about the school and that family. Send me the name of the hospital that guy is in. I will find someone to arrange it for you. Rinpoche hung up the phone after he finished speaking. As for why the school didn't punish that guy but Rinpoche, he didn't want to ask. What's a taker? The Empress turned and asked. Nothing. Rinpoche shook his head. I have to go to Quan City tonight. Chapter 310. Ren Wanyin studied at Lu Province University, which was located in Quan City. It was a quick flight from Shanqing and he arrived that night. He didn't greet anyone and immediately slept in the hotel. Early the next morning, Rinpoche went to the bank to withdraw 700,000 yuan and put it into 2 Adidas sports bags that he bought by the roadside. When he withdrew the money, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the 2 bags. He went to the hospital and found the ward according to the address. He heard the person inside saying, let's see if they want money or punishment. Don't worry, this matter isn't over. They even beat people up. Don't you have any respect for the laws? Rinpoche pushed the door open and went in without saying a word. He saw a young man lying on the bed with a face full of pimples. There was a man and 2 women sitting beside him. One of the men and one of the women was older, about 50 years old. The other woman was about 30 years old and was well dressed. The voice he heard just now was younger and should belong to this woman. These people all looked similar and seemed to be from the same family. Are you his family? Rinpoche closed the door after the Empress came in. They were puzzled when they saw a man and a woman come in. The man looked ordinary but the woman was really beautiful. Although she looked cold, she was more beautiful than the celebrities on TV. You are? The woman in her 30s asked. It's them? That's Ren Wanyan's brother. I saw him on his phone. The young man on the bed, Lu Man, immediately shouted. However, he didn't recognize Ren Baqian but the Empress. Upon hearing this, their expressions turned ugly. The woman in her 30s raised her eyebrows. Your brother beat up my brother like this. I won't let this matter rest until you give me an explanation. It seems like you are his family? Ren Baqian nodded. I'm his father. What do you want? The man in his 50s immediately stood up and said in a gruff voice. That's easy. Don't you want compensation? Here. Ren Baqian threw the 2 bags on the ground. Who are you trying to scare? Let me tell you, this isn't a matter of money. How did your family educate you? How can you beat people up so casually? Now that you're beating up your classmates in school, are you going to kill people in the future? Lu Man's sister rolled her eyes around the 2 bags and immediately shouted. Previously they had only asked for 100,000 yuan. How much could these 2 bags contain? It could hold at least 8 million. Therefore it was definitely not money. Ren Baqian squatted down and pulled open the zipper, revealing stacks of cash inside. It doesn't matter whether it's about money or not. Here was 700,000. This was the amount of compensation for a normal death. I don't like the way he talks. The 700,000 yuan was used to buy his tongue. Come to think of it, you guys have profited, Ren Baqian said faintly. As soon as he said that, the few of them were immediately pissed off. Lu Man's sister stood up and scolded. What do you mean? Who are you trying to scare? Do you think I won't call the police? From top to bottom, your whole family is nothing. As he spoke, he took out his phone. Ren Baqian nodded. I'm going out for a while. If you guys want to call the police, just do so. I'll be back in a while. After finishing his sentence, he opened the door and left with the Empress. After Ren Baqian left, Lu Man's sister was still scolding him. She took out a stack of cash from her bag and said, Who are you trying to scare with toy money? Halfway through her sentence, she couldn't continue. The money in her hand looked real no matter how she looked at it. She shone it under the sun. It wasn't toy money at all. It was real money no matter how she looked at it. What's wrong? Papa Lu asked when he saw that her actions and expression weren't right. This money seems to be real. Lu Man's sister whispered. That's impossible. How much is so much money? Papa Lu was shocked and quickly came over with Mama Lu to check. They looked at a few stacks in a row and each stack was filled with real money. This time the 2 of them were also shocked. It's real money. How much is there? I'm afraid there's more than the 700,000 yuan that he mentioned. Lu Man's sister whispered. What is he going to do with so much money? The few of them were shocked. Even Lu Man, who was lying on the bed, was shocked. She rolled out of bed, went forward to take the 2 stacks of money, and found that they were all real. This time everyone was scared out of their wits. What is he going to do? Why don't we call the police? Mama Lu whispered. Papa Lu's face began to change. Didn't you say that his family is just an ordinary person? Lu Man's sister turned her head and looked at Lu Man, feeling a little apprehensive. If she didn't know that Ren Baqian's family was an ordinary person, she wouldn't have dared to do this. His brother seems to be the only one in his family. The one just now is a businessman and has some money. Lu Man also looked perturbed. These people were all ordinary people and at most they were a little unruly in their hometown. However, they were shocked when they suddenly encountered someone who threw 700,000 yuan on the ground and left. Even Lu Man's sister only had a few million yuan. After deducting the 2 houses, she only had a few 100,000 yuan in her hands, and most of it was in the stock market. Ren Baqian knew a few people in school and other places. He seemed to be powerful to his family, but that was all. Ren Baqian's actions gave them a fright. Lu Man's sister looked uncertain. She clenched her teeth and said, Let's wait and see what he has to say. Don't touch the money. After more than half an hour, Ren Baqian pushed the door open again. Without waiting for them to speak, he directly pulled open the 2 bags, revealing the stacks of money inside, and threw the bags on the ground. Bang! 2 consecutive sounds made their hearts skip a beat. This is still 700,000 yuan. I don't really like what you said. I will give you 700,000 yuan and you will give me your tongue. You won't lose out. Ren Baqian pointed at Lu Man's sister. Lu Man's sister immediately exploded. So what if you have some money? I will call the police now and see what you have to say when the police arrive. Who are you trying to scare with more than 1 million yuan? Look, I'm a fair person. Usually, the compensation for a death is only 700,000 yuan. I will take the compensation for 2 deaths and only want 2 tongues. Think about it yourself. Do you want to do it yourself or let me do it? If I do it, it might hurt a little and the wound won't look so good. I will give you a day to think about it. I will come back tomorrow. Ren Baqian's face was calm and his tone was very gentle. You can take the money. It will be yours sooner or later. Don't go, I will call the police now. Lu Man's sister immediately dialed the police number. Whatever. Do you think the police will arrest me when they arrive? Ren Baqian's expression finally changed and he looked a little amused. Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have some money? This is a society ruled by law. Lu Man's father, who was a wicked and troublesome person in everyone's eyes, was so flustered that he even brought the police into the picture. As for Lu Man and Mama Lu, they had long been frightened, and their faces were deathly pale. One had to know that someone who could throw away more than 1,000,000 yuan and threaten to buy tongues without batting an eyelid was definitely not an ordinary person. Even if the police arrested him in the end, they would still suffer a loss. Moreover, Ren Baqian's calm appearance was even more frightening. They had a feeling that they were in big trouble this time. Lu Man was extremely regretful. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have caused so much trouble. Why did she have to be so shameless in the first place? Even if they had a fight, why did she cause so much trouble? At the same time, she felt a little resentful toward her father and sister. If they hadn't kept saying that this matter wasn't over, she wouldn't have done it. Ren Baqian revealed a kind and slightly bashful smile. Someone asked me the same thing the last time. Look, I'm still standing here, which means that I can really do whatever I want. Chapter 311. The moment Ren Baqian left the hospital, those people immediately exploded. The 4 bags were filled with money. There was a total of 1.4 million yuan in them. How could an ordinary person do such a thing and say such things? How could he be easy to deal with? Lu Man's face was pale and she was dumbfounded. What should we do, Xiaoqing? What do you think we should do? Mama Lu was frightened and didn't know what to do. Lu Man's sister, Lu Qing, was pale, but she still managed to maintain her composure in front of her family. Mom, don't say anything first. Let me make a few phone calls. Then she made a phone call and explained the situation. As for the cause and effect of the incident, she naturally sided with her family. However, she told them about Ren Baqian's attitude and the 1.4 million yuan. The person on the other end of the phone call was a grassroots cadre. He usually had some authority, but he wasn't stupid. He knew that this was a thorny matter and anyone who got involved would be jumping into a fire pit. How could someone dare to do such a thing without some backing? Even if it was a relative who encountered such a thing, they would avoid it as far as possible, let alone Lu Qing. After half a minute of silence, he said, I can't help you with this matter. It's better for you to apologize to the other party. After saying that, he hung up the phone. Lu Qing's face was gloomy. Apologize and admit her mistake? Should she apologize and admit her mistake just because the other party threatened her? Was there still any law in this world? Judging from the other party's current behavior, he definitely wasn't an ordinary person. However, she wasn't resigned to it. Before she could make a second call, the door of the hospital room was pushed open again. 2 young men came in. We are from the security department. What did the person who came in just now say? The 2 men asked after scanning the room. Security department? The few of them were baffled. What was the security department? Here are our documents. We need your help. Tell us everything that the person said and did just now. The 2 men took out their documents from their pockets, opened them and waved them in place. Although Ren Baqian was very important, his family wasn't closely monitored. After all, they had limited manpower and couldn't possibly use it on unrelated people. They only collected information on them from time to time. This time, before they could react, Ren Baqian had already killed his way to Quan City. Only then did they realize that something had happened. After understanding part of the situation through some channels and knowing that Ren Baqian had just withdrawn 1.4 million yuan, they felt that something big was going to happen. As such, they directly went to the hospital to look for the person involved. Ren Baqian had just left when the 2 of them came in. Let me see. Lu Qing took a few steps forward and took the ID. When she saw that it was actually a square head, she was immediately shocked. Then his eyes lit up. Could it be that this person had committed some crime and was being targeted by the National Department? That person's behavior was not surprising at all. It was as if he had met his savior. You guys came at the right time. That person threatened us just now. He scared me to death. I thought there was no longer any law in this world. What did he say? The two men frowned slightly. They had a rough understanding of the situation. Some of them blamed the Liu family for being meddlesome. If it wasn't for them, how could they have caused such trouble? He now had a certain understanding of the two's personalities. No matter how his personality became like this, one thing was for sure. He was extremely troublesome. Lu Qing poured out Rinpoche's words like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. She also added oil and vinegar at the same time. She was extremely skilled at doing this. Papa Lu also added in from time to time. The two of them further exaggerated the extent of Rinpoche's viciousness. Tell me, there's actually such a person nowadays? It was his younger brother who injured my younger brother, yet he still acted like this. I thought I had returned to the old society, Lu Qing said angrily. The two of them looked at each other and said, "You guys wait here. You guys want to arrest him?" Lu Qing asked with her eyes wide open. At the same time, she wondered if they would take away the 1,4 million yuan on the ground if that person was arrested. Don't do anything else. Wait for news. The two of them instructed, turned around, and left the ward to make a call to their superiors. When Qin Shi heard this news, he felt a headache coming on. That person dared to shoot at him. Was he easy to talk to? It wasn't easy to get that person to behave for a few months. Furthermore, both parties were in the honeymoon stage of their cooperation, and now this incident happened. Look for them and try to mediate. The first priority is not to disturb the social order. Chief, it's not easy. The two young men immediately revealed a troubled look. They had seen all kinds of information about those two people and were very clear about what kind of people they were. It would be weird if they were easy to talk to. Even if it's not easy, we still have to do it. This is a society governed by law. We can't let them do whatever they want, Qin Shi said in a deep voice. He then added, we can settle the matter with the school. As for the Liu family, if we can't get them to apologize, we are the ones who caused this incident. If they didn't have evil intentions, this incident wouldn't have happened. Their actions can also be considered extortion and blackmail. So troublesome. After the Empress got into the car, she felt that Rinpoche was too long-winded. He actually talked so much. We have to give the others time to react. Rinpoche laughed. In this aspect, the Empress was too simple and straightforward. And then? The Empress guessed who he was talking about. She felt that many things in this world were done in a roundabout way and weren't straightforward at all. If it was in that world, she might have thought more about it. But to her, this world was like a vacation place. She didn't want to think about it at all. Then, let's see if they are smart or not. Rinpoche laughed. What do you mean? The Empress turned to look at him and asked. Rinpoche turned to look at the Empress and moved his body closer. The Empress immediately placed her hand on his face to stop him from moving closer. However, it was very gentle. At least this time there was no blood. Rinpoche gently licked the Empress's palm. Immediately, the Empress felt as if she had been electrocuted. She quickly withdrew her hand and raised her other hand as if she was going to hit him. She waved her hand but didn't make a move. Like I said before, this is also a declaration. No one should provoke me. Otherwise, I will magnify any small matter infinitely and seek revenge for the smallest grievance. After all, I'm just one person and I can't handle so many people thinking about me. It's still okay now, but people are always insatiable. There will always be people thinking about more things. Then, they will test my bottom line bit by bit and squeeze more things out of me like squeezing toothpaste. I don't want to encounter such a situation in the future. Therefore, I want to repeatedly remind them what kind of person I am. A kind person will be bullied and a kind horse will be ridden. The saying makes sense. In this way, when they want to have crooked thoughts in the future, they will have to think twice before killing me. If they can't, they will endure it. I am so long-winded because I want to give them time to react. What happens after that? After that, I will kill them in front of them. Rinpoche laughed heartily. This is what you call provocation, right? The Empress didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his attitude. If he were to be killed, so be it. If he were to be overcautious and hesitant, she wouldn't like it. However, Rinpoche's actions were obviously provocative. So let's see if they are smart or not. Rinpoche stretched out his index finger and lightly tapped on the Empress's lips. His next action was to tap on his own lips. This was a little fun between couples. Even though the Empress was always a little shy, this kind of action was still acceptable. Then, the Empress did something unexpected. She opened her pearly white teeth and suddenly bit down. Chapter 312. Ren Baqin and the Empress left the hospital and went straight to Furong Street. This street was located in the center of Quanqing and was famous for its snacks. Both of them felt very excited when they arrived at this place. For the rest of the journey, both of them had a clear division of labor. Ren Baqin was in charge of buying while the Empress was in charge of eating. Basically, as long as there were slightly more people in front of the store, both of them would go one round. Teppanyaki super large squid, transparent shrimp dumplings, octopus meatballs, transparent shrimp dumplings, grilled cheese, smoke ice cream, fried pork tripe, rujiamo, pineapple rice. The two of them didn't care about the surrounding scenery at all. All their thoughts were on eating. Ren Baqin couldn't help but be envious of the Empress's appetite. The entire street was filled with food. Both of them had eaten more than 2,000 snacks that ranged from a few dollars to more than $10. Of these snacks, 99% were eliminated by the Empress. Humans were far from achieving this level of strength. It was unknown how many foodies wished to eat all over the street, but unfortunately no one could achieve it. After eating for more than 3 hours, even though some of the dishes didn't taste that good, they were fresh. Most of them were dishes that the Empress had never seen before. This made her feel that this trip wasn't as boring as before. Just taking a stroll around here was already worth it. Even though the Empress had a good appetite, there were still some things that she couldn't eat. For example, she threw the stinky tofu to Ren Baqin. Since then, she consciously kept a 1-meter distance from him. She always felt that he had a stinky smell, which made Ren Baqin feel aggrieved. Stinky tofu tastes delicious, okay? The two of them wandered around outside as if they had nothing to do, while the others could only watch from afar. After all, there was an incident where Ren Baqin opened fire after being disturbed. Qin had a deep impression of it. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to disturb the two of them while they were shopping. Qin had long sensed that these two people were just docile donkeys. As long as he did not provoke them, nothing would happen. He would just live like an ordinary person, shopping, watching television at home, going out to eat. For people like them to have superhuman strength and not stir up any trouble and keep such a low profile, it was really surprising. He had a good impression of the two of them. Sometimes, when I think about it, maybe this is how a cultivator should be. After all, the difference in their levels was too great, and their pursuits were different as well. Therefore, they did not care much about the money and status that everyone in the world pursued. However, if someone provoked them, then they would be in big trouble. The two of them would definitely not be lenient. Just like this incident, it seemed like a small matter to many people. As long as Ren Baqin gave a call, someone would immediately handle it. But he didn't even say a word and just charged over. This was too much for them to handle. Qin also made up his mind to spend more effort on Papa Ren, Mama Ren, and Ren Wanyin. At the same time, he had another idea. He would recruit Ren Wanyin into a certain department, which would definitely be of great use in the future. It seemed like Ren Baqin still cared about his family. Even though he didn't go home often, he made a lot of phone calls. He was no different from an ordinary person who drifted outside. Ren Baqin and the Empress ate all over the street and finally returned to the hotel. The hotel had a suite with 2 bedrooms and a big living room. After the Empress came back, she didn't even change her clothes. In a flash, she landed on the sofa and naturally turned on the television. Ren Baqin felt that the Empress's daily routine was to eat, watch television, eat, sleep, eat, watch television, an endless cycle. Every time he thought of this problem, he felt that he had committed a grave sin. Just as he threw off his shoes and sat on the sofa, he heard a knock on the door. Coming? Ren Baqin thought to himself. He dragged his slippers over to open the door and saw a man standing outside. He was about 35 to 40 years old. His looks were ordinary, but he looked very calm. Hello, Mr. Ren. My name is Wang Zijuan. I have something to discuss with you. Can we talk inside? Wang Zijuan nodded slightly and revealed a friendly smile. However, he didn't shake hands with him. Come in. Ren Baqin opened the door. He threw off his slippers and sat cross-legged on the sofa. He pointed to the side and said, Make yourself at home. Sorry to disturb you. Wang Zijuan smiled and sat on the single-seater sofa at the side. The lives of the two of you are really enviable. Unlike us who are always busy, Wang Zijuan said with a smile. Ren Baqin nodded and didn't reply. He had no intention of making small talk anyway. The Empress hugged a pillow and used the remote control to search for her favorite program. Mr. Ren, I'm from the Ministry of Security. I'll be straight to the point. It's like this. We have already understood what happened to your younger brother. There's definitely no problem with the school, so you don't have to worry. Although the people from the Liu family are a little annoying, they are just ordinary people. Compared to you, they are like heaven and earth. You don't have to worry about them. Why don't you let us handle them? They will learn a lesson from this incident. Rinpoche heard this and knew that this was a typical case of turning a big problem into a small one and then turning a small one into nothing. This was the end of the matter. However, how could Rinpoche let this matter end like this? He smiled faintly and said, "Although mosquitoes are small, they still have to be swatted to death." Wang Zijuan heard this and realized that it was just as he had expected. After hearing the whole story, he had already guessed that this would happen. Why don't we let them apologize to you? After all, you said that you would abide by the law after coming back. There's no need to go against your words for these ordinary people. It's not worth it for a person like you to waste your energy on these people, Wang Zijuan immediately said. Rinpoche shook his head and said, "At that time I said that if no one provoked me, I would definitely abide by the law. Moreover, I was already very restrained. Otherwise, I would have swatted them to death today. Isn't that simple and direct? Why do you have to say so much nonsense?" He changed the topic and said, "Actually, rather than trying to persuade me, why don't you persuade those people? It's just a tongue, what's there to be reluctant about? They won't die anyway. Keeping that thing around will be a disaster for some people. Who knows when they might die from it?" Wang Zijuan smiled bitterly and said, "You must be joking, Mr. Rin. We are currently cooperating with each other, and both of us are very satisfied with our cooperation. The higher-ups also hope that we can continue to cooperate in a friendly manner and don't want this matter to affect both of us. That's none of my business. You see, I don't lack money, nor do I lack anything else. The so-called cooperation is more like I've made a certain sacrifice for the progress of the people of the world. I've taken out something that belongs to me. Although it's in the name of cooperation, you guys have gained more than me. Oh, in that case, I'm really quite great." Rinpoche thought about it and felt that he was indeed very great. "Look, I'm such a noble person, a pure person, a moral person, a person who has broken away from vulgar interests, and a person who is beneficial to the people." Rinpoche was all smiles. He suddenly realized that he was actually so great and he felt a little excited. Wang Zijuan was speechless. He really didn't know how to respond to Rinpoche's words. Sure enough, it was as difficult to deal with as described in the information. "Mr. Rin, let's talk about it. How do you think we can resolve this matter?" Wang Zijuan asked bluntly. "I want those 2 tongues. I'm a man of my word. If I say I want 2, I definitely don't want 3. If I say I want to kill their entire family, I won't leave a single one alive. Of course, this time, I'm just giving them a small punishment to tell them that they can't be too ruthless. The heavens are watching what we do. Of course, if you are willing to put them in cement cans and throw them into the river, that's fine with me. Whether it's from a legal or moral point of view, what Mr. Rin is doing is illegal and too ruthless. Our duty is to protect the people. It's impossible for us to watch Mr. Rin do such a thing." Wang Zijuan felt a headache coming on. Did I really go too far? Rinpoche turned to look at the Empress with a puzzled look. If it were me, I would have smacked them to death. If anyone has any objections, I will smack them to death too. The Empress finally shifted her gaze away from the television with a look of disgust. "You see, I'm too soft-hearted." Rinpoche turned his head and spread out his hands. "Mr. Rin?" Wang Zijuan was interrupted by Rinpoche before he could finish his sentence. "I've already said what I wanted to say. There's no need to say anything else. You can try to stop us, but I suggest that you persuade them. Goodbye, remember to close the door." Rinpoche waved his hand. Seeing that there was no way to negotiate, Wang Zijuan left the room with a gloomy face. After he left, Rinpoche smiled. He was very satisfied with his previous attitude. His attitude was very amiable and had already expressed his goodwill. "You said that it depends on whether they are smart or not. If they are smart, what should we do?" The Empress was a little curious. Rinpoche had already spoken so harshly. She didn't know how Rinpoche was going to end this matter. "Your Majesty, you have to give me some rewards before I can tell you." Rinpoche turned his head and spoke in a tone that sounded like he was asking for benefits. His face was full of anticipation. For example, he would tell her if she gave him a kiss or if he gave her a kiss. Then he was kicked off the sofa by the Empress. Qin Shi received the news. After smoking 2 cigarettes, he frowned and said, "Arrest those people from the Liu family for extortion." Initially, he didn't have any good ideas. However, the Liu family had asked Mama Ren for 100,000 yuan in medical fees. This matter could be either big or small and he could use it now. This could also be considered as protecting the few of them. Otherwise, if Rinpoche and Qi Zixiao really wanted to do something, it would be very difficult to stop them. What should they do then? Fall out with them? Or should they pretend that nothing happened? No matter what they did, it wasn't appropriate. On the contrary, this was the most suitable way. According to the regulations, 100,000 yuan was considered a huge amount of extortion and extortion. They would be sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Since this was an attempt, their sentence would be reduced and they would be released in 1 to 2 years. By then, Rinpoche would have long forgotten about it. This family wasn't any good people. This time, it could be considered as giving them a long memory. Lu Jing was still waiting in the hospital. At this moment, she had an unbridled look on her face. Those 4 bags of money were placed beside her. And when her husband just heard about this matter, he was a little speechless. That person is really courting death. Judging from his behavior, I don't know how many crimes he has committed. He should have been arrested a long time ago. It would be best if he was executed immediately, Lu Jing sneered. There was nothing more satisfying than someone threatening you right in front of you, only to be arrested and thrown into prison the next moment. Are they going to take the money away? Papa Lu asked. At this moment he was starting to have some ideas. Even if they could get tens of thousands of yuan in medical fees, it would still be good. It's okay. After such a big incident, I don't believe that the family won't fork out the money. When that happens, it won't just be a matter of 100,000 yuan. They also deserved it. Wouldn't it be over if they settled it earlier? They insisted that I go to the school. Now, the younger one is being punished by the school and the older one is also going to jail. Lu Jing felt that she had already won, and that the Rin family was going to be in big trouble. Be careful in the future. If you really offend someone you can't afford to offend, it will be troublesome, Lu Jing's husband said. What are you afraid of? Lu Jing said disdainfully. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? When a few police officers came in, Lu Jing immediately went up to them and asked, Has that person been arrested? At this time, other than this matter, she couldn't think of any other reason for the police to come here. They were probably here to inform her. Are you Lu Jing? One of them asked. Yes, I am. Lu Jing said with a relaxed expression. You are suspected of extortion and blackmail. Come with us. This is a detention warrant. The police did not say anything else and directly handcuffed her. The sudden change of events stunned everyone in the room. How did it become Lu Jing's arrest? Is there a mistake? Lu Jing's eyes widened as she asked in a shrill voice. Lu Man, Lu Mingjing, take them away too. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. Even Lu Jing's husband, who had just arrived, was stunned. How did this happen so suddenly? That night, when Rinpoche received the news, he said to the Empress, See, there are always smart people in this world. I can't possibly chase them to the detention center, can I? This way I can express my attitude and save myself the trouble. The Empress raised her head and snorted, ignoring him. Rinpoche listened to her voice and felt that it was a little cute. He called his parents and told them that the matter had been resolved. Then they chatted for a while. Then he lay on the sofa and watched the Empress's swaying figure walk into the room. He was in a daze for a while and then sighed. Now, his relationship with the Empress was pretty good. He was getting more and more familiar with the Empress's character. In some aspects, the Empress was also becoming more and more like a girl. However, the difference in strength was too big. Even if they were married now, Rinpoche felt that he would be unlucky on the day of their wedding night. He still had to work hard. After the Empress closed the door, Rinpoche thought for a while and lay back on the bed to practice the visualization of wood. Once again he appeared in the world where there was only a towering tree. The Empress heard the noise outside. She sat on the bed with a slight smile on her face. She rolled a few times on the bed, hugged a pillow and pondered for a while before falling asleep. The night passed. Early the next morning, the two of them set off for Shurching and conveniently displayed a wave of public display of affection on the plain. Qin Shi heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this news. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The matter was resolved just like that. Chapter 313. In this world, nothing is eternal. Water can turn into steam, it can also freeze. Stones can be weathered into sand and dust. Metals can also be turned into liquid under high temperatures. Under changing conditions, nothing is eternal, Rinpoche said to everyone on the stage. Everyone listened to him obediently. Although they looked a little older and stronger, they were different from ordinary primary schools in remote mountainous areas. However, they were essentially the same. Rinpoche had learned to ignore the surface and look at the essence. At least on this matter. Rinpoche had already started to consider whether to customize their uniforms. There were also red scarves and 1, 2, 3 stripes. However, Rinpoche felt that they could be changed to 1 knife, 2 knives, all the way to 9 knives. After a period of time, everyone had become familiar with this new life and their new identities. Their interest was also aroused. After all, many of the things that Rinpoche talked about were unheard of and even unthinkable. Some of the content was acceptable, while others were difficult to accept. For example, Rinpoche's words just now. Rinpoche was very satisfied. Although it hadn't been long, this group of naughty kids had finally learned to raise their hands and ask questions under the care of his gun. The bandages on several students were the price of love. He couldn't rule out the possibility that 2 of them were accidentally injured, but he didn't care too much about these details. Speak. Rinpoche used a pointer made of pure iron and as thick as a finger to point at a young man below. The heroic spirits of our ancestors are eternal. They have always been protecting us, the young man suddenly said loudly. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at him. His gaze made the young man feel a little uneasy and vigilant. That's right. There are still some things in this world that people can't detect, including the heroic spirits of our ancestors. Therefore, what I'm teaching now is the basic structure of the world, the things that have been discovered, and the things that are currently unknown will be handed over to you. Science is about standing on the shoulders of the predecessors and constantly discovering the unknown, not denying the unknown. I hope you all remember this. Rinpoche smiled very calmly. He didn't deny the existence of those heroic spirits, just like how Earth couldn't deny the existence of ghosts. These were all unknown things that hadn't been discovered yet, but it didn't mean that they didn't exist. Just like how he had not found the reason for his transmigration, it did not mean that it did not exist. It only meant that he had not discovered it yet. Rinpoche's calm smile made many of the students heave a sigh of relief. They were also somewhat elated. This was a rare affirmation from Rinpoche. Tong Lan supported her chin with one hand and grinned. In her heart, she was laughing at the bunch of idiots around her. The world is made up of molecules, atoms and ions. This is the foundation of the world. These invisible molecules, compounds, and ions make up all the matter in this world. Teacher, since we can't see it, how do we know if what you said is true? Someone immediately raised his hand and asked. You can't see the molecules with an optical microscope. You need an electron microscope. If the conditions are right in the future, I will make a set for you. In addition, there are many other ways to verify it. I will explain them to you in the future, Rinpoche said faintly. Immediately, someone asked what an optical microscope and an electron microscope were. Rinpoche gave simple answers to these questions. Usually, the physics class went well and Rinpoche was in a good mood. Therefore, the physics class was held in the first period. Today, we will do an experiment on the transformation of the structure of water. First, under normal atmospheric pressure, water will reach its boiling point at 100 degrees Celsius and turn from water into water vapor. Rinpoche spoke with fervor and assurance as he placed a small pot, an alcohol stove and a thermometer on the desk. Come, let's take a look. The thermometer has reached 80 degrees Celsius, and 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water. As Rinpoche spoke, everyone craned their necks to take a look. Although everyone knew that water would turn into water vapor after boiling, this was the first time such a formal experiment was conducted. Many people were very interested. Then, everyone watched as the temperature of the water exceeded 100,101,102,103. 110 degrees. Alright, it has now been proven that under normal atmospheric pressure, water will boil at 110 degrees Celsius and turn into gas. At this pressure, the temperature of the water will also be maintained at 110 degrees Celsius. Rinpoche extinguished the alcohol stove and threw it out of the window along with the pot. Teacher, you said 100 degrees Celsius just now. Tong Lan's eyes were bright and full of expression. The atmospheric pressure isn't constant. It varies from region to region. Usually, the higher the altitude, the lower the atmospheric pressure. Here it's 110 degrees Celsius. You just have to remember that the higher the atmospheric pressure, the higher the boiling point, and the lower the atmospheric pressure, the lower the boiling point. This was the first time Rinpoche realized that the atmospheric pressure in this world was actually different from that on Earth. This also reminded him once again that although he didn't feel much difference, this world was, after all, a different world. There were still many things that were different from that on Earth. In order to develop technology in this world, everything had to be verified little by little. Otherwise he might get slapped in the face again. Next, he used saltpeter to turn water into ice in front of everyone. This surprised everyone and immediately reminded them of the shaved ice that was sold outside. This lesson talked about the two forms of water transformation. When the lesson was about to end, Rinpoche asked someone to move the teaching materials that he had brought back from the next room and distributed them to everyone. "Teacher, what are these?" "Your future learning materials are from my country." Everyone knew that Rinpoche wasn't from Dayo. However, not many people knew which country Rinpoche was from. "I come from a very distant country. It's so far away that you will never be able to reach it in your lifetime. Our country is very different from this world. In our country, people prefer to study the nature of the world. In our opinion, the degree of understanding of the world will become one's strength and allow one to achieve things that were previously impossible. For example, a machine that can run faster than a galloping horse, a machine that can fly in the air, a machine that can lift objects that weigh 100,000 kilograms or even 500,000 kilograms. This was also the first time that Rinpoche frankly talked about some things about Earth to someone other than the Empress. Previously, he was afraid that people would know that he had a lot of good things in his hands and set their eyes on him. As a result, he didn't dare to say much. However, with the change in his status, he no longer needed to worry about this and naturally didn't need to hide it. Furthermore, he had already exposed a lot of things. Instead of letting them guess, he might as well take this opportunity to briefly explain. There was nothing shameful about it. It was better than letting them guess whether he was from Great Xia or the Yun Nation. "Teacher, what's this?" Someone pointed to a picture that had just been flipped open in a physics book. "Is this the machine that you mentioned?" "It's a high-speed rail that can travel more than 1,200 kilometers in 2 hours without any rest. A place that would normally take a few days to reach on a galloping horse can be reached in just 2 to 4 hours. If Dayo had this, it would only take 4 hours to reach Ping City from here. If anything happens, our army can reach Ping City in 4 hours." Rinpoche's words caused everyone to look surprised. One had to know that it would take half a month to travel from Lan City to Ping City by carriage and 3 to 4 days on a galloping horse. If there was a war, they would be able to provide support at any time with this thing. Furthermore, battle reports could be sent back at any time. This was too valuable. Most of the people present were the children of officials. Even if they weren't very talented or reckless, they could still think of this thing. If you want to build a high-speed rail, you need a lot of things. I can teach you, but it's up to you when it can be built. Rinpoche smiled. He liked to see the excitement and anticipation on the faces of these students as it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Following which, he told the students some other things. The students felt as if they were listening to a book from heaven, and all of them widened their eyes. Tong Lan and Shurgan didn't get distracted and listened attentively. However, this joyous atmosphere didn't last for long. During the second lesson, Rinpoche's roar was heard again. During the mathematics class, gunshots were heard. Chapter 3:14. Is that what Principal Rin said? Tong Jingye was shocked to hear Tong Lan's words. That high-speed rail thing was actually so fast? It was simply terrifying. With this thing, Dayo could send reinforcements in all directions at any time. For example, they could mobilize the troops from the Protectorate of the South and the Protectorate of the Southeast to the north and send them out directly. If what Principal Rin said was true, it would be close to the means of the gods. This is the thing. Tong Lan took out a book, flipped open the cover, and pointed at something for Tong Jingye to see. I don't know if he's bragging. Tong Jingye stroked his beard and looked at it carefully for a long time, firmly remembering the image. Don't talk nonsense. Principal Rin is truly capable, Tong Jingye said in a deep voice. He was aware of the few things that Rinpoche had done. Rinpoche had the most dealings with the Ministry of Works, so he recognized him the most. Rinpoche's official position had also changed. He was now the principal of Black Bamboo Academy, the highest and only academy in Dayo, and his official rank was secondary class, rank 4. Speaking of which, Rinpoche's promotion speed was extremely fast. He couldn't even beat me and sent me flying with a flick of my finger. Tong Lan curled her lips. You can't say that. Even though some people don't have extraordinary martial arts skills, they are better than many others in other aspects. There are many such people in Great Xia, and Principal Rin is also one of them. At least, the things that he said shocked even me. Tong Jingye shook his head. It seems that sending you to the academy was the right decision. Tong Jingye was quite proud of his gaze when he mentioned this matter. When he took the initiative to send Tong Lan to the academy, her father didn't approve of it. Now it seemed that it was the right decision. I feel that I've become stupid after being with a bunch of fools every day. According to him, being stupid is contagious and my IQ has been dragged down. Tong Lan pouted unhappily. Besides Tong Jingye, who often asked Tong Lan what she had learned, the families of the other students would also ask about it from time to time. The main reason was that Rinpoche's initial explanation of everything in the world had shocked them. However, these days, these juniors who were sent to Black Bamboo Academy had learned a lot of strange knowledge, and no one knew if it was good or bad. Lao Lu, let's go out for a drink. In a remote courtyard of a residence, a door was suddenly pushed open, and a tall and burly young man in a robe strode in. A young man sitting at the table was tempted. He hadn't gone out for a drink for a few days. In the past, it was unimaginable. In the past, a group of brothers would go out drinking and having fun almost every night. Now they would sit in the house and do homework every night. Lan, let's go. That girl said she hadn't seen you for a few days. I said she missed you. The big man patted his shoulder and said. At the mention of that girl, the young man who was addressed as Old Six was even more tempted, and he almost agreed. However, he recalled what Rinpoche had said before. Rinpoche's right. Dong Tong said, Bachin Jingye the Yi, that he said. Lan. Rin, Lan I said. I have Rin has yang people's Tian is as yang as E is yang is has yang teacher is yang is. There are 2 more days until my rest day. I'll go out for a drink then. Yagüe was the nickname they gave Rinpoche. Yagüe was a monkey-like animal in the 60,000 mountains, but it was ferocious, fast, and strong. In their eyes, Rinpoche was similar to Yagüe. He looked thin and weak, but he was ferocious. Lao Lu, when did you become so timid? You are like a sissy from Great Xia. The burly man was surprised. Lao Lu used to be very bold, but he didn't expect him to become so timid after being sent to Black Bamboo Academy for half a month. He didn't even dare to drink, let alone do his homework. Get lost, don't disturb my homework. Lao Lu scolded and ignored him. He continued to work on his math problems with a bitter look on his face. 3 times 9 is 18, 7 times 7 is 56. The next day. Bang. A gunshot was heard from the Black Bamboo Academy. School doctor. Su Wei shouted loudly. Coming. A bald burly man who was thinner and weaker than the aboriginals, came out of the room with a package. Bang. Before he could enter the classroom, another gunshot was heard. Rinpoche cursed, I'm going to kill all of you idiots. Treat his wound first. Use the black mud cream to treat it. I will shoot him for 5 minutes today. 2 days later, the young man called Lao Lu and Du Lao Lu were sitting in a restaurant with a few friends. It had been 5 days and he finally saw some wine. Without hesitation, he drank a jar. After drinking a jar of wine, Du Lao Lu heaved a long sigh of relief. Why don't you come out recently? I heard that you do something until midnight every night? A pretty young girl with a voluptuous figure said. She scolded him fiercely at first, but her words turned into curiosity at the end. Sigh. Du Lao's heart ached at the mention of this. Du Lao Lu pulled down his shirt and pointed at his shoulders and arms, which were covered with pale circles that were whiter than the rest of his body. They were all done by Yagüe. Not only here but also on my legs. Yagüe? The people around him were curious. It's the principal of the academy. Du Changkong complained gloomily about Rinpoche's atrocities. The people around him burst into laughter. Why don't you come back like Tai Zhe? Du Lao Lu was silent for a while before replying, Brothers, I'm not like you. Even if my talent isn't amazing, it's still passable. In my case, I will most likely end up like what the principal said. I will be raised at home and become a good-for-nothing. At least now is an opportunity. Everyone was silent after hearing this. In fact, many people had people like Du Lao Lu in their families. Although there weren't many of them, everyone knew that they could often see them. It wouldn't matter if they were commoners. However, in their families, having such talent was a sin in itself. Du Lao Lu wasn't talented, but he was loyal and smart. Therefore, he got along well with everyone and everyone was willing to invite him out to play. However, they also knew that if nothing changed, Du Lao Lu would probably remain the same in the future. Therefore, no one could refute Du Lao's words. Can we really learn something there? The pretty girl asked. Du Lao Lu nodded. Although he didn't know what use the things he learned now, other than mathematics, would be in the future, he believed that he would be able to learn something. In that case, I will look for you to play on your days off. The girl smiled and her eyes lit up. Du Laolu nodded and was very grateful for what she said. He swore to himself that he would definitely learn something so that he wouldn't become a good-for-nothing in the future and then marry her. Chapter 315. There was a ripple in the air. Ren Baqin appeared in Pingle Park, sitting on a mechanical monster that was made up of various metal parts and had a wheel on each side. That's right, Ren Baqin brought one back from Earth to show the students what a technological product was. Even though that bunch of idiots often made him furious, he was still very attentive. This was because he saw something in those students that he didn't have in the past. The desire to learn. The thirst for knowledge. Even though they were a little stupid and their minds were filled with muscles and sakama, at least they would do their homework every day. Ren Baqin was very satisfied with this point. The motorcycle was a cruising prince. It was a Benda origin beast that was launched in China last year and weighed more than 170 kilograms. The body of the motorcycle was compact and full of muscles. For the people in this world, it should be full of sci-fi. He took off 2 big bags and a box from the back of the motorcycle, checked them, and hung another bag. Besides the Empress's snacks, a thumb drive filled with television dramas, solar street lights, batteries and solar panels. After putting everything down, Ren Baqin exerted force with both hands, shouted softly, and picked up the motorcycle to put it down in the courtyard. Then he put on his sunglasses and stepped on the starting lever. When the motorcycle roared, he had no choice but to stop. A chubby fellow was hugging the motorcycle's tire and rubbing against it. "Get lost!" Ren Baqin shouted. Then another panda eagerly came over and hugged his leg. "Sir, what kind of monster is this?" The guard outside heard the noise and wanted to come in to ask what was going on. Then he saw the monster that Ren Baqin was sitting on. "Take these 2 fellows away." Ren Baqin waved his hand. After that guard carried the 2 pandas by their necks to the side, Ren Baqin stepped on the starting lever, turned the accelerator, and directly drove out of Pingle Park. What kind of monster is this? Just as he left the courtyard, he met a group of guards. The person in front almost pulled out his saber and slashed at him. He was a classic example of a person whose hands reacted faster than his brain. "Spare him, spare the motorcycle," Ren Baqin quickly shouted. He was almost scared to death by that reckless fellow. That person quickly withdrew his saber. "Can't you see that I'm up there?" Ren Baqin clenched his teeth. "Sir Ren." The 5 guards quickly cupped their hands. "When I heard the roar and saw this thing, I thought it was a monster. Sir Ren, please don't blame me." Ren Baqin gritted his teeth. This bunch of muscleheads. The few of them looked at Ren Baqin, who had ground 2 black gemstones into thin slices and hung them in front of his eyes. Recently, many adults seemed to like these things very much. Every day they would look up at the sky with these things on their heads. Then he shifted his gaze to the motorcycle that Ren Baqin was sitting on. "Sir Ren, what is this?" "This is my new ride. Make way, make way. Let me show you." Ren Baqin and the rest made way for them. Then he stepped on the accelerator and sped off with a roar. "What monster?" "Spare the chariot," the same voice came from afar. The guards were still in a daze. What exactly was Sir Ren's new mount? They didn't have legs. Instead, they were 2 things that looked like carriage tires. "This item is extraordinary," someone said enviously. The others nodded in agreement. This mount was much more powerful than riding a horned cow. Along the way, Ren Baqin was almost killed a few times. He was so angry that he cursed out loud. Fortunately, when he arrived at Yangshin Palace Hall, he carried the Empress's snacks in. The Empress was still watching television. Recently, she had been obsessed with it. In the past, when she had nothing to do, she would call for 2 musicians. Ever since she had a laptop, the few musicians in the palace were almost out of work. "What was that sound just now?" The Empress turned her head and asked. That sound was inexplicably familiar. A motorcycle. Ren Baqin smiled and opened his bag. He took out 2 bottles of wine and placed them at the side. Then he took out the Empress's favorite ice cream and said, "It's still cold and hasn't melted." The Empress took the ice cream, wrinkled her nose slightly and looked very satisfied. "Dang dang dang dang, and your favorite popcorn." Ren Baqin took out 2 buckets of popcorn from his bag and instantly appeared in the Empress's hands. Following which, the Empress stuffed all kinds of chocolates and candies into the cracks of the sofa. In the past he didn't pay much attention to these things. Now Rinpoche finally knew where the Empress usually hid her snacks. He took out a few packets of potato chips, placed the empty bag at the side and sat on the sofa. His fingers intertwined as if they were dancing on the sofa. The moment he touched the Empress's palm, he heard a slap. Rinpoche nonchalantly touched the back of his hand. He couldn't remember who once said, "Get used to being beaten and beaten." This sentence was very reasonable. You said that there might be salt in the mountains. The Empress suddenly thought of this problem after watching a television series for a while and seeing the dishes on the television series. Salt was still very important to Dayo. The price of salt in Dayo had always been limited by people. Let's wait for another month. First, teach them some basic knowledge, then bring them for an outing in the mountains. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, now that he had just gotten on the right track, he really didn't want to abandon this group of students and run into the mountains. It would be better to wait for another month until the beginning of March. At that time he would be able to demonstrate a chemistry experiment to them. Of course, the prerequisite was that the lake was as he imagined it to be. Those people in the south are being dishonest again. A few days ago we found a lot of crossbows made in the Yun nation and chopped off the heads of more than 300 people. However, this matter isn't over yet, the Empress said faintly with a trace of killing intent in her voice. Rinpoche rubbed his head. He had long heard about the situation in the south from the Empress. He also had some ideas, but it required time. He still had to go and see for himself. Let's put this matter aside for now. If there are any disobedient people, we can just chop them off. In any case, we have to chop them off sooner or later. It's not a pity to chop off those fools who expose themselves so easily. The rest are those who are honest or well hidden. I will see how to deal with them when the time comes. Rinpoche was a little hesitant. Should he kidnap an elite MLM from Earth? Those guys were definitely much stronger than him in this aspect. However, that kind of person was a double-edged sword. If used well, the problem in the south would be easily solved. If not, it might cause even more trouble. Rinpoche also felt that kidnapping a monk could have the same effect. However, it was also a double-edged sword. He wondered what would happen if he set up a religion in the south. It seemed that the effect would be better and it would be easier to control. If he combined the MLM model with religion, the effect would be fast and it would be easy to control. Furthermore, if he thought about it in the long run, this kind of religion could also dissolve the antagonism between the Aboriginals and the Han Nation's immigrants. As for what this religion would become after his death, according to Rinpoche's opinion, the future generations would have their own blessings. Chapter 316. The next day Rinpoche rode the motorcycle under the escort of the ox riders. He was exceptionally eye-catching. Ever since he left the palace he had attracted a lot of eyeballs. This was the first time they had seen such a thing in Dayo, especially when it made such a strange roar. Even Su Wei and the rest would occasionally glance at Rinpoche and the monster he was riding. On this day when the students entered the academy, they saw the strange thing standing at the side. A group of people surrounded the motorcycle and curiously touched it. It was very hard and seemed to be made of metal. However, the black color on the outside didn't seem to be a common dye, so they couldn't figure out what exactly it was. Many people would eat 2 rolls on the road and touch the motorcycle, leaving a pile of greasy claw marks. What's this? I don't know. Is it made by the teacher? This is the machine that the teacher mentioned. Look at this, it's all made of iron. It looks weird, but it's a little light. I don't know what it's used for. A student lifted the motorcycle above his head and spun it a few times before putting it back in its original position. Tonglan, what are you doing? A short person suddenly squeezed in from the crowd. After touching the motorcycle a few times, she used her fingers to scratch it. Aya, you left a mark, someone immediately shouted. A bunch of fools. This is the color of the outside, Tonglan said in disdain. She used her fingers to scratch a long mark on the motorcycle. Rinpoche looked at the group of students surrounding the motorcycle from afar and didn't mind at all. This thing was originally meant for them to broaden their horizons. During class a student asked about it. Rinpoche casually said, "You will know later. Previously we talked about the change of state of matter. Today let's talk about the phenomenon of light." Turn to page XX in the physics textbook. Rinpoche would now read from the textbook during class every day. While learning physics he also learned how to write. After the class ended for the day, Rinpoche walked to the side of the motorcycle and saw the scratches on it. He grinned and didn't blame them. Then he sat on the motorcycle, stepped on the start lever and twisted the accelerator. The motorcycle immediately emitted a loud roar, and the two pipes at the back started to emit smoke. This gave the students a shock. How could this thing fart so loudly? Rinpoche then galloped away like a wild dog that had escaped its leash. The group of guards hurriedly shouted and followed him. This thing can actually be ridden and it can even run, some students said in surprise. It seems very fun. Tong Lan's eyes sparkled. She was not the only one with stars in her eyes. Many of the people around her did the same. After all, this thing was too novel. It did not have long legs, but it could still run. Riding this thing on the streets wasn't just flashy, it was simply coquettish. Rinpoche rode back to the palace in an extremely coquettish manner. A few big shots who had just come out of the palace were shocked when they saw the thing that Rinpoche was riding. Principal Rin, what kind of mount is this? Tong Jinya came over and touched it curiously like a country bumpkin. Where's the mouth? How do I feed it? Without waiting for Rinpoche's reply, she grabbed him by the collar and pulled him down. Then she rode on him and knocked one of her legs on the side of the car. Why aren't you leaving? Tong Jinya became curious again. Looking at Tong Jinya's bumpkin appearance, Rinpoche ridiculed him with his nose in the air. After sending Tong Jinya and the rest away with great difficulty, Rinpoche returned to the palace. The next morning, the students were still circling around the motorcycle like yesterday. Did Yagüe ride it like this yesterday? One of them looked outside and did not see Rinpoche. Hence he copied Rinpoche and sat on it. What happened next? How can it move? The group of students looked at each other. They were too busy looking at this thing yesterday and did not see how Yagüe made it move. On this day after school, all the students looked at Rinpoche with bright and piercing eyes as he rode off on his motorcycle. Did you see that? How did it move? I saw its legs move twice. It looked like it was stepping on the ground. Its wrist also twisted. First the left hand, then the right hand. It should be like this. After school on the third day, the group of students continued to watch Rinpoche's movements. It was basically the same as yesterday, and they had actually memorized all of Rinpoche's movements. Early in the morning on the fourth day, Tong Lan carried her bowl and stood on the fork-horned cow. She walked while eating so that she could go to school earlier to play with that thing. When she arrived at the door, she stuck her head out and looked inside. She did not see Rinpoche, but she saw that thing in the corner. There were two bastards who were even faster than her. One of them was sitting on the motorcycle and imitating Rinpoche's movements by stepping on a small pole at the side. In a flash, Tong Lan appeared behind the two of them and shot the person on the motorcycle into the wall. She then sat on the motorcycle and said, I will play with it first. I will return it to you after I am done. The person who was shot into the wall was called Su Peng. He got up from the ground with a resentful look on his face. In order to play with this thing, he specially came over early in the morning. In the end, it was snatched away by this girl who was only half his height. However, he could not defeat this girl. Tong Lan sat on the motorcycle and snorted. Then a smile blossomed on her face. She held onto the handlebars with both hands and kicked the starting lever with one leg. She did not kick it. Tong Lan's face immediately turned green. Her legs were actually not long enough. Ha! Su Peng and Du Laolu, who were dissatisfied that Tong Lan had snatched the right to play this thing from them, immediately burst into laughter. It was really funny to see Tong Lan's short legs kicking and kicking, but she just could not reach it. Rinpoche, who was standing in front of the window and watching this scene from afar, burst into laughter. He quickly picked up his phone and wanted to take a picture of this scene. It would definitely be a dark history in the future. However, by the time he picked up his phone, Tong Lan had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. She flipped over on the motorcycle and kicked Du Laoyu's head from above, causing him to fall to the ground. She then flashed and appeared in front of Su Peng. She used one hand to deflect his fist and hit his chest with her head. Boom! A hole immediately appeared on the wall. Su Peng was nowhere to be seen. Sir, it won't be damaged, right? Su Wei, who was standing behind Tong Lan, was a little worried. This thing must be very valuable, and it would be a pity if it was damaged by this group of kids. It's okay. Rinpoche waved his hand. This could also stimulate the students' interest in learning. This thing was nothing to him. It was just a little troublesome to bring it over from Earth. Tong Lan was still unconvinced. After she beat the two of them to the ground, she tilted her body and started the motorcycle. She didn't even bother with the bracket, twisted the accelerator and sped away. The motorcycle flipped over in less than 3 seconds. At the moment when it flipped, Tong Lan jumped and landed on the ground, causing the motorcycle to flip over. Not fun. Tong Lan placed her hands behind her back, raised her small face and swayed back to the classroom with a proud look on her face. She saw Rinpoche's smiling face full of wrinkles as he looked at her from the window. She even made a funny face. After Tong Lan left, Su Peng flipped over the wall and entered the classroom. His whole body was covered in dust from the cement bricks, and he looked like a demolition worker. While he was still looking around for Tong Lan, another person lifted the motorcycle and sat on it. Su Peng was furious when he saw this. When he looked at that person again, he was immediately filled with anger, but he couldn't let it out. He couldn't beat this person either. Shurgan. The two youngest students in the entire academy were the best at fighting, which made the others very depressed. Shurgan wasn't very old, but he was about 1.7 meters tall and had a strong physique. He rode on the motorcycle with a pleased look on his face. He first tried it out, then tightened the accelerator, stepped on the start lever, and the motorcycle immediately sped away. Rinpoche watched as the motorcycle sped like the wind and crashed into the wall. The back of the motorcycle was lifted up, and Shurgan's head was directly hit against the wall. Boom! When the dust settled, the motorcycle was seen lying in front of the courtyard wall. It was already out of shape. There was a big hole in the wall. Shurgan was nowhere to be seen. This bunch of idiots. Rinpoche, who was standing behind the window, almost burst out laughing. He had already recorded everything that happened just now, especially Shurgan's happy expression as he sat on the motorcycle and stepped on the start lever. Coupled with what happened 2 seconds later, it was really too funny. If the video was played in slow motion, one could even see the frozen expression on his face the moment he crashed into the wall. Rinpoche was prepared to go back and get a video camera so that he could record all of this in the future. After a few years, when they had become the mainstay of the imperial court, he would then show the series of movies, The Growth Log of a Bear Student, to the whole of Dayo. Chapter 317. Tong Lan, Shurgan, do the two of you have anything to say about the motorcycle? Rinpoche stood on the stage and asked after the day's lessons. He broke it. Tong Lan immediately extended her small hand and pointed at Shurgan. It has nothing to do with me. Shurgan was still covered in dirt. After all, he had smashed his head against the brick wall and fell. After hearing Rinpoche's words, he put on an innocent expression. If he didn't know that this guy wasn't a good person, he might have been deceived by his expression. Rinpoche grinned and looked very sinister. Before him you had already fallen once. At that time you were already injured and there are witnesses and material evidence. Rinpoche spread his hands. Anyway, even if I didn't fall, I would still be broken by him, Tong Lan immediately retorted. I was walking alone with 150 taels of silver in my pocket. First, you robbed me of 50 taels and then Shurgan robbed me of 100 taels. It can't be that if you didn't snatch it, the 150 taels of silver would have been snatched away by Shurgan. That doesn't make sense. Dayo's laws are there, Rinpoche said as he knocked on the table with his pointer. You have to pay for damaging other people's property. It's as natural as repaying a debt. This principle has to be followed everywhere. After hearing Rinpoche's words, Tong Lan was so angry that she gritted her teeth. However, this matter was there and couldn't be avoided. Shurgan continued to put on an innocent expression. Teacher, I don't have money, Shurgan said. It was obvious that he didn't have money, but he had his life. I don't have money either. Tong Lan's eyes lit up. It doesn't matter. As your teacher, it's too tacky to talk about money. You see, I have never asked you for tuition fees since you entered the school. This time I'm not going to ask you to pay. Now you have 2 options. Rinpoche stretched out 2 fingers. First, fix the motorcycle within 7 days. Second, clean the toilet every day for a month. As soon as Rinpoche said this, Tong Lan exploded in anger. Impossible. How could such a cute young lady like her clean the toilet? How was that possible? If that was the case, she would probably be called a toilet girl for the rest of her life. How would she get married in the future? Tong Lan clenched her fists. The innocent expression on Shurgan's face disappeared and was replaced by widened eyes. If looks could kill, he would have hacked Rinpoche into pieces. His father was Shurqing, yet he actually wanted him to clean the toilet? Imparting knowledge and educating people is not only about teaching, but also about educating people. Not only do I have to teach you knowledge, but I also have to teach you how to be a person. Although my heart aches, I have no choice but to do this. Rinpoche's face was full of regret. The faces of the 49 people below were bright and full of expression. Who are you trying to fool? Your eyes are twitching from laughing so hard. Do you think we can't see that? If you don't want to clean the toilet, go fix the motorcycle. I'll give you 7 days. If it's not fixed by then, you can only clean the toilet. Don't think of anything else. It's useless even if you bring your 2 fathers here. Rinpoche placed the pointer on the lectern, clasped his hands behind his back, hummed a tune and walked out of the room. The others continued to stare at him with bright eyes. Didn't you have a pained expression on your face just now? What do you mean by your body becoming lighter? As soon as Rinpoche left the classroom, there was an uproar. Tong Lan smashed the table with her small fist. Following which, she stomped on the table and said, damn Jianghu, I will definitely not let you off. Rinpoche suddenly poked his head in again and said, remember to fix the table tomorrow morning. You know the consequences. He even winked at Tong Lan, which almost infuriated her to death. After he disappeared, the classroom, which had been quiet for a few seconds, became chaotic again. There were more than 10 other female students in the classroom who supported Tong Lan. After all, Tong Lan was very pretty, and there were still many female students who felt sorry for her. There were also a few people who laughed heartily. They were Su Peng Du Laolu, and 2 other teenagers who had escaped a calamity in the morning. They laughed happily but were then shot into the wall by Tong Lan. Shurgan stood up from his seat, walked to Rinpoche's previous position, cleared his throat and attracted everyone's attention. Following which, he cupped his hands and said, brothers and sisters, this matter is very important. Please help us. After this, regardless of whether we succeed or not, I will host a banquet at House Shanhui to thank all of you. I won't go home until I'm drunk. Ever since Shurgan entered the school, he rarely interacted with others. In addition, he always looked like he was daydreaming, so many people didn't really like him. However, now that he said this and addressed them as brothers and sisters, it wasn't good for them to stay out of this matter. One after another, they laughed and said, then we will wait for you to treat us to a drink. Rinpoche, who was next door, learned about what happened in the classroom and had a whole new level of respect for Shurgan. Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse knew how to dig holes. This saying indeed made sense. In fact, there were 2 people in the school who didn't fit in with the crowd. One was Tong Lan, and the other was Shurgan. Both of them were young but they weren't weak. Their talents were considered outstanding among their peers, and they were very different from the others. Naturally, they were somewhat arrogant. However, their behavior was different. Tong Lan was very obvious. Even though she would shoot people into the wall at the slightest provocation, she was beautiful and cute. This was the most important point. No matter which world one was in, one could rely on one's looks to make a living. Tong Lan was small and short, so many people treated her as a little sister. This was especially so for the female students. Tong Lan had never laid her hands on the female students in the school. As a result, there were actually quite a number of people who liked Tong Lan. However, Shurgan was different. Other than daydreaming, he was daydreaming every day. Even though he didn't behave like Tong Lan, everyone could sense the arrogance in his bones. When Tong Lan encountered trouble, there were people who would help her, but no one cared about Shurgan. Today, after Shurgan realized that it would be very difficult for the 2 of them to fix that seemingly complicated thing in 7 days, he immediately said these words, which brought back a lot of people. After all, they were all aboriginals in their teens and didn't have too many complicated thoughts. Rinpoche just didn't know if he already had the idea to improve their relationship, or if he only had this idea after encountering this matter today. If it was the former, it would be fine if he already had the idea to get closer to others. However, if it was the latter, Rinpoche wasn't very happy about it. However, no matter what, it showed that Shurgan was more mature and smarter than his peers. Thinking about how his father was great elder Shurchin, it made people feel at ease. No matter what race it was, there would always be some eccentrics. The entire race was made up of crazy cats, and there were even cats whose personalities were similar to dogs. For the next few days, a group of people would surround and study the motorcycle every morning and afternoon. From time to time they would hear, this part should be straight. Bend it straight. You broke it. This thing is too brittle. It will break in one move. Quickly find a blacksmith to make a new one. Are you here to help or to cause trouble? Why did you pull this off? How do we put this thing back? There was an endless stream of similar voices. During this period, Tong Lan would snort coldly. Whenever she did something wrong, she would raise her head to the sky and snort proudly. There was also Shurgan's encouraging voice, "Brothers and sisters, you are the best. Every small step we take forward is a great victory for us." Every time Rinpoche heard something like this, he would be puzzled. Where did Shurgan learn all these from? He hadn't heard anything like this from great elder Shurqin. It would be a waste of talent if he didn't become a young pioneer. Over the next few days, Rinpoche observed their daily repair progress. He was positive about their demolition ability, but also pessimistic about their repair ability. Shurgan and Tong Lan couldn't run away from the task of cleaning the toilet. This wasn't out of his expectations. If they could repair it, they wouldn't be students from Black Bamboo Academy. They would definitely be from Lanxiang. In a courtyard in Lan City, a few men gathered together and whispered to each other. Lin Zhongli and the other 5 were all killed yesterday, the man in the middle said in a deep voice. Everyone's faces darkened when they heard this. More than 40 people split into 7 teams and sneaked in. Now only a few of us are left and we didn't even get close to that person. The man at the side was indignant. More than 40 Earth Wheel experts were handpicked from the army, but they didn't even get a chance to get close to that person. The city has been so strict for the past 2 months. We didn't even get a chance to make a move, and we already lost more than half of our men. I'm afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission even if all of us are sacrificed, another man said dispiritedly. After all, this isn't our territory. As long as we are slightly suspected, they won't even interrogate us before killing us. There are at least 100 people who have been killed recently. In my opinion, we might as well take a risk. Even if we fail, we will have tried our best and be worthy of the Emperor's grace. A man who looked somewhat effeminate gritted his teeth and said, "That person has 30 Earthwheel experts by his side every day. We won't even have a chance to take a risk. It's better than the current situation. Who knows, we might not even have a chance to take a risk tomorrow or the day after tomorrow," the effeminate man said. "There's no need for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. All of you can go and die now." A rough voice suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard, following which a loud sound came from the courtyard wall. The entire wall turned into countless stones that smashed toward them. 2 of them barely managed to dodge a few stones before they were smashed into a bloody mess by the remaining stones. They couldn't even make out their human forms. The rest of them soared into the sky and fled in 3 different directions without saying a word. Several rays of sword gleam rose from the ground and streaked across the sky. Those few people were prepared when they fled and drew their weapons one after another. After a few sounds of swords colliding, it was as if there was a rain of blood in the sky. A slightly short and sturdy man walked into the courtyard and sneered, "We can't even get through today, so how can we talk about tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? The most important thing for a family is to be neat and united. Since all of you came to Dayo together, I will send all of you down together." The other burly men who leaped into the courtyard were speechless. These words sounded rather imposing the first time they heard them, but they couldn't stand it when Sir Ren said it every day. Rinpoche had already said it more than 10 times in the past 2 months. "Sir Tai, there are no survivors," someone quickly reported after checking the corpses. "Bring the corpses back to be used as fertilizer for the flowers. Recently, I got some good stuff from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. I heard that they were made by Principal Ren. One is called a sweet potato and the other is a pumpkin. I believe that they require human blood to grow well." Tai Yin made a gesture, turned around and walked out. From what these fellows said just now, there was no one else. Maybe they were just fooling him. Even if they were telling the truth, there was no guarantee that no one else would sneak in. Chapter 318. A week had passed. Rinpoche nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at the tattered trailer, which was even more damaged than before. "Remember 1 month?" Rinpoche pointed at Tong Lan and Shurgan. "Everyone is a brick in Dayo. Wherever it is needed, we will carry it. Regardless of your status, work hard. The pail and brush are all there. I hope the toilet will be clean the next day." Rinpoche waved at everyone, turned around and floated away. Everyone was dejected. However, this situation had been expected 2 days ago. Shurgan accepted it quickly, cupped his hands at everyone and said, "Brothers and sisters, I have troubled all of you. Let's drink till we are drunk at Shanhui House." It's just that this little brother has one more thing to trouble everyone with. Shurgan was slightly embarrassed and said, "Everyone please aim properly these days and don't spill outside." Everyone was speechless. Tong Lan's face was puffed up like a bun. She was angry. It made people want to pinch her. However, everyone knew that she was cursing in her heart and didn't want to provoke her. "Why don't we get 2 odd job workers to clean up since Jianghu isn't around?" someone suggested. Shurgan smiled bitterly and said, "He isn't that easy to fool. We don't know what will happen. Jianghu has a saying that is right. If you are wrong you have to accept punishment. If you are beaten you have to stand straight. Since things have come to this, you have to do what you have to do." Everyone naturally knew that Rinpoche wasn't easy to fool. Seeing this they didn't say anything else and left with a sigh. This was the first time the 49 students worked together to do something, but unfortunately, it ended in failure. The next day, Rinpoche went to the men's toilet early in the morning. It was an old-fashioned school toilet. The school toilet left a deep impression on him when he was young. When it was built, people specially built a slope with cement. Every day, a large amount of water would be used to flush it down, and it would directly flow into the big hole outside the wall. However, the smell was still strong. After all, day was too hot. The toilet was a little dirtier than when the odd job workers cleaned it every day, but it was indeed cleaned. Since this was the case, he didn't need to ask for too much. After all, getting Shurgan and Tong Lan to clean the toilet was a very big matter in itself. After school at noon, when he was walking halfway, someone suddenly jumped out of nowhere and shouted, "Sir Ren, stop." The surrounding guards were startled at first, thinking that they had encountered an assassin. They even drew their swords halfway. He took it and saw that it was the Minister of Works, Tong Jinye. Lord Tong. When Rinpoche saw the ugly expression on Tong Jinye's face, he guessed that it was probably because of Tong Lan's toilet cleaning. "Sir Ren, isn't it too much to ask Lan to clean the toilet?" Tong Jinye shouted. "A country has its laws and a mansion has its rules. No matter who it is, I will treat everyone equally," Rinpoche said. "If you do this, Tong Lan will be ridiculed by others in the future. Even if Her Majesty is here today, I will not let this matter rest." Tong Jinye shouted. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at him. He pressed a button on the walkie-talkie with one hand and said, "Sir Tong, not many people knew about this at first, but after you shouted, everyone will know." If he remembered correctly, this seemed to be Shi Qing's residence. How can such a thing be hidden from others? "Sir Ren, even though you and I get along well for Lan'er's sake, I have to let you see my sandbag-sized fists." Tong Jinye raised his fists and said, "Sir Tong." Su Wei and the others immediately blocked in front of Rinpoche. "Get out of the way or I will beat all of you up too," Tong Jinye said in a rough voice. "Sir Tong, this is our duty." Su Wei frowned. "In that case there is no need to say more. Today I will let all of you know why flowers are red." Tong Jinye snorted and appeared in front of Su Wei in an instant. He bent his legs slightly, and his body was half a meter above the ground. He was the same height as Su Wei and the others who were sitting on the fork-horned cow. Then he threw a heavy punch at Su Wei. Su Wei met it with a punch as well. After a head-on collision, Su Wei was immediately sent flying. Tong Jinye pounced on Rinpoche from above. "Protect, sir!" someone shouted and jumped from the fork-horned cow. However, he was slapped down by Tong Jinye. Rinpoche saw that Tong Jinye's speed was as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had sent Su Wei and another bodyguard flying. Rinpoche raised his hand and fired a shot at Tong Jinye. In any case, he knew that he couldn't hurt Tong Jinye and was only trying to slow him down. When Tong Jinye saw Rinpoche holding a small black object in his hand, his pupils shrank. In an instant, he turned his body in the air, causing Rinpoche to miss his shot. Then he slapped the bodyguard below him down from the fork-horned cow. Using this force, he made a half-turn in the air and pounced on Rinpoche again. "Today I will let you know what a sandbag-sized fist looks like." Tong Jinye laughed wildly in the air. A red silhouette suddenly appeared beside Tong Jinye. Before anyone could see the red silhouette's movements clearly, Tong Jinye flew like a cannonball and smashed into the wall of the residence next to him. He even caused half of the wall to collapse. After that blow, the red silhouette landed on the back of a fork-horned cow. She stood there with a calm look on her face. "Greetings, Your Majesty," everyone said in unison. "How big is a sandbag-sized fist?" the Empress asked coldly. Tong Jinye returned to the courtyard dejectedly. Your Majesty, I want Lan'er to practice martial arts with him every day and teach him punches and kicks, but he made me clean the toilets. Sir Tong, a man should be clear about his actions. Even though Tong Lan accompanied me to practice martial arts, even if she didn't contribute much, she still has to be punished for her wrongdoings. This is the most basic principle. Furthermore, she isn't the only one cleaning the toilets. There's also Great Elder's son, Shirgan. Great Elder hasn't said anything yet, Rinpoche said righteously. Tong Jinya frowned and seemed to have thought of something. Then, he clapped his hands in realization and said, "No wonder Great Elder told me about this. Otherwise I wouldn't have known. He actually dug a hole for me. I'll find him now and make him pay. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first." Rinpoche's eyes were bright and full of expression. "Tong Jinya, you old bastard, can you act any better? Don't be in such a hurry to leave. You still haven't told me how big a sandbag-sized fist is." "I'm very curious," the Empress said faintly. Tong Jinya laughed dryly, cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, I just saw a sandbag-sized fist. It's really powerful and I'm very impressed. It's just that the fist was too fast and I really couldn't see it clearly." "In that case, I'll let you see it again." In a flash, the Empress appeared in front of Tong Jinya and sent him flying with another punch. Another half of the wall surrounding the Great Elder's residence collapsed. Shi Qing sat in the courtyard and looked at Tong Jinya, who was lying on the ground with blue eyes. He poured himself a cup of tea and drank it before saying slowly, "I won't settle the score with you for framing me just now, but you have to fix this wall, right?" Tong Jinya spat. "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."